Call the San Joaquin County Board of Supervisors meeting for October 4th at 9:03. Please join me in a moment of silence, silent meditation or reflection. Thank you. Vice Chairman Rickman, would you lead us in the pledge?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. All right, moving along to present proclamations. I'm sorry, roll call. Thank you, Supervisor Miller. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Villapudua? Supervisor Rickman?
Here.
Supervisor Miller?
Here.
Supervisor Patty?
Yes.
And Chairman Nguyen.
Here. All right, moving along to recognition presentations. Supervisor Patty, would you mind making the presentation?
Thank you, Chairman.
As Supervisor Patty comes down to read the proclamation, I'd also like to invite Arthur Hill, the director of the Cancer Center, to the podium to receive the proclamation.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I believe we also have, we've got, the St. Joseph's Breast Cancer Nurse Navigator is here. Excellent. Well, you can do the introductions then. Great. So gives me great honor and our responsibility on behalf of the board to present this proclamation, whereas according to the World Health Organization, breast cancer became the most commonly cancer globally in 2021. And whereas approximately 1 in 8 women and 1 in 833 men in the U.S. will develop breast cancer in their lifetime. And whereas only 5 to 10% of breast cancers are linked to gene mutations inherited from one's parents, and 85% occur where there's no family history. Aging increases this risk. And whereas mothers who breastfeed for more than 1 year reduce their risk by 26%, however, only 35% of U.S. mothers nursed their infants for a year, as recommended by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And whereas there are several types of breast cancer, which are divided into non-invasive and invasive types, which can be diagnosed at different stages of development and can grow at different rates. And whereas the American Cancer Society established Breast Cancer Awareness Month in 1985 to promote mammography as the most effective weapon in the fight against breast cancer. And whereas between 1989 and 2019, there was a 40% drop in breast cancer death rates, which is largely attributed to early detection and treatment. Now, therefore, be it resolved that this San Joaquin County Board of Supervisors does hereby proclaim October 2022 as Breast Cancer Awareness Month in San Joaquin County and supports and encourages efforts which will improve the health and well-being of our citizens, all of our citizens. Presented this 4th day, October 2022. Please.
So thank you for inviting us to share in this proclamation. My name is Art Hill. I am the director for the Cancer Center at St. Joseph's Medical Center. With me today is Jen Curl, the operations manager, and Griselda Olivas, she is our breast cancer nurse navigator. I want to thank all the members of the board for this proclamation because it goes a long way to getting awareness out there, and awareness is the key. Thank you. Awareness is the key. Everyone needs to be aware of some of the sobering facts around breast cancer. You mentioned that 1 in 8 women will experience breast cancer in their lifetime. That's 12% of the women's population in the United States. On average, every 2 minutes, a woman is diagnosed with breast cancer. I think one of the most troubling new statistics that's out is that estimated that 9 million women skipped their annual mammography screening for the past 2 years because of the pandemic. And the result of that could be a later stage of diagnosis that's found if and when they go back to have that screening done. So our community needs to be aware of early detection. Really, if you catch the disease early while it's still localized in the breast, you have a 70% chance of having a 100% survival rate for the next 5 years. And that's huge. And really, there's a lot of people doing a lot of things for different treatments. Even some cures and preventions are being worked on. But right now, our number one objective and battle that has the biggest impact is to be able to do that early screening, diagnosis, early treatment before that spreads from the breast to put them into treatment and get that cured as much as possible, or healthy as much as possible at this time. So anyway, thank you. Thank you from the Cancer Center. Thank you from all the providers in the community, all the other service organizations who work with breast cancer patients daily. Again, your actions, the proclamation goes a long way to increasing that awareness, which is so important. Thank you.
Would you kindly introduce your support staff here?
This is Jennifer Curls. She is the operations manager at the Cancer Center. And Griselda is our breast cancer nurse navigator, helps breast cancer patients all through the continuum of care.
Jennifer or Rizal, would you please step up and have anything to add? We welcome any comments. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Coming to the board, Supervisor Kathy Miller.
Thank you. Thank you for all that you do. I don't think there's any of us that have either not had a family member or a friend who has gone through breast cancer. It's tough, but you're right. With early detection, it's survivable. And so we're really happy to help raise the awareness. And I also heard that very troubling statistic. I actually know someone who skipped their mammogram last year and went in and they detected it, and they might have caught it a whole year earlier. So it's really important not to miss the screening. And we thank you all for everything you do, not only for the treatment, but for raising the awareness. Thank you.
Supervisor Villapudua.
Thank you, Supervisor Patty. Sir, I want to thank you and your staff for bringing this forward, Supervisor Patty. And breast awareness is very scary, and glad we're bringing this to attention, and appreciate what everybody does in the whole county and everywhere. Thank you very much.
Vice Chair Rickman.
Thank you, Supervisor Patty, and thank you all for being here. And I look forward to this proclamation every year because I think it is a very powerful proclamation. The awareness, what you mentioned about the treatment, letting people know about the treatment, and hopefully someday finding a cure. I know, as Supervisor Miller stated, I think we've all been affected in one way or another. I know my grandmother passed away from breast cancer. And just yesterday, myself, our firefighters, local firefighters, our police officers, students, and teachers from Trina Elementary School in Tracy did a cancer walk to bring awareness. And the more awareness that we can bring forward, like exactly what you're doing here, is more lives that we can save for bringing that awareness. So thank you all for being here very much, and God bless you.
Chairman Nguyen.
Director Hill, I really appreciate, the emphasis in regards to screening, and I say that because, as has been stated by my fellow supervisors, we all know someone who's not only been affected by breast cancer, but cancer in general. And I would agree with you, and I know there's been tremendous progress made to treatment in regards to cancer, all types of cancer. But I would agree certainly with the breast cancer in this particular proclamation. But more importantly, I think the message should be for all that periodic screens are absolutely necessary because, as you stated, and it has been proven time and again, if we can detect it early, we can correct it quickly, and the treatment would be less invasive than it can be. So again, thank you and your staff for what you do. Make a big difference in our community again. So please pass that on to the staff and all those who are on the front lines, so to speak, doing this great work.
Thank you.
I would just conclude in saying that while this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, this is something obviously 365 days of the year is important for the awareness and examinations, self-examinations, using the screening process, engaging with the doctor, and not assuming that you're healthy and you feel fine before it becomes metastasized and too further down the road. And the exciting part about it is there are treatments. There is science and technology at a greater degree now than ever before. So we really do need to engage, and a little bit of awareness goes a long way, but I know that your work is truly around the clock and every day of the year. So we're glad we can have a mild recognition for this month, but we know that you guys go all year long. So thank you for all that effort, and it's much appreciated.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, moving on to public comment. Now is the time for the public comment on matters within jurisdiction of the Board of Supervisors not listed on the agenda and minutes, appointments, consent calendar, or closed session items. We request that you fill out the comment form, which I have here, to address the board in person. There is a time limit of 3 minutes for these comments. The device on the podium with green, yellow, and red light. The yellow light comes on 30 seconds before the end of the 3 minutes. With regard to public comment, the law strictly limits the ability of the Board of Supervisors to discuss matters not on the agenda, so this is not an appropriate time to have a discussion with the board regarding your comments. We ask that you refrain from personal attacks during your comments and that address all comments to the Board of Supervisors and not the audience. So, Robert Wilson.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Robert Wilson. I actually was here last week. And it's unfortunate that I felt the need that I should come back here again this week. But on the discussion under general government, item number 1 here, accept the recommendation of the Board of Supervisors ad hoc committee regarding alleged violation of code of ethics by Supervisor Tom Patty and censure him for his misconduct. This is really egregious that this is even on the calendar today. This should have been tossed off last week, should have never been on the calendar. This whole thing is basically a monkey court process of what you got going on here. There's no legitimate basis for this claim. Mr. Patty, when he tried to defend himself, was then claiming that he was harassing people simply because he's standing up for his First Amendment rights and self-defense. This is not due process under the law. This is not even constitutional procedure. This is an outrage. And this matter should be, nobody on this board should be voting to censure in this matter because there's no basis for it. And the process that was used for this matter is an outrage. And let me just say that in terms of Mr. Wynn, the chairman, you've been highly partisan on a number of issues since you've been chairman of the board. And just to name one thing, when Mr. Villapudua, under your normal procedures, was up to be chairman of the board, you bypassed him and just said, well, we're not going to do that way, even though that was customary to do that. Maybe Mr. Villapudua doesn't think that's a big deal, but it wasn't your normal procedure. And that's just one example. But this matter should be taken and voted against, if not just outright tabled, period. Thank you very much for your time.
Alex Aferis.
My name is Alex Olaferis, and thank you for the dog and pony show last week, folks. What a great dog and pony show. The reality is, and I refer back to a New York Times article, July 28, 2007, by Christopher Drew, the New York Times. Scientists test hack into electronic voting machines in California and elsewhere. And let me read down right here. Computer scientists from California universities have hacked into 3 electronic voting systems used in California and elsewhere in the nation and found several ways in which vote totals could potentially be altered, according to reports released yesterday by the state. Now, last week's Dog and Pony show didn't talk about this, and Mr. Peter Leichheld said, quote, everything is hackable, end quote. Was he referring to something? Was he gaslighting us? Because that's all we're hearing these days. We're having officials, just like this COVID-19, they're gaslighting us. And let's talk about food and genetics. You know it's true. The CCP, Communist China getting the results of these COVID nasal tests. You know, you lied on that. And the voting machines, you know, we need to ban the voting machines. That's what it comes down to. Have hand counts. Don't have these machines tabulate the results. You can hand count it and have people vote. And we recommend that people vote on the same day of the election. Do not vote early with your absentee ballot. Take your absentee ballot on the day of the election. There's 127 polling stations. You want to secure your vote? Probably the best way is to vote on the day of the election. And do not surrender your absentee ballot. Keep it or let them destroy it. Folks, this is a very serious matter, and I don't think you take it very seriously. And as a supervisor, you get paid a lot of money to do the research, not to register voters. You basically referred everything to register voters for her to do something. Of course she's going to make up a report, a dog and pony show, to cover up everything. Just like you guys have covered up on food and genetics, just like you're covering up on the COVID-19. Yeah, you're still getting money from it. No wonder we have outrageous inflation in today's America. No one can barely afford food and gas because of this endless money printing from the Federal Reserve. Paper money is freaking, it's ridiculous. So come out. We want the truth, folks. Ban the voting machines. Why don't you want to vote on it?
Carla?
Good morning, Board. How are you?
Morning.
So referring to the presentation last week, one of the things we had asked the ROV to do was to answer all our questions on the report we had turned in to you and to her, or to them. I won't pick on her. One of the things that didn't get answered was on the sample ballots for the primary, 10,700 approximately got returned and deliverable. Did ballots go out to those addresses? Yes, they did. So what is the point here when they're not upgrading the rolls? So first of all, we're wasting money. And second of all, you're sending ballots out. Do you know that they don't have anywhere to go? And then they're coming back. So what is the point of that? That needs to be changed. The rolls need to be updated. That is one of the biggest things that's going on. Thank you.
Hey, Melanie Knott?
Good morning, Chairman Wynn, Board of Supervisors. My name is Melanie Knott, and I'm a resident of San Joaquin County and newly appointed as an alternate member of the San Joaquin County Citizens Election Review Advisory Committee by Mr. Supervisor Patty. I rise today to speak again about election integrity. First, let me say thank you to the ROV, Olivia Hale, and her team for their hard work in last week's election integrity presentation. Also to Hart Intercivic Representative Mr. Peter Lechtenheld for his presentation on behalf of Hart Intercivic. Now, let me make a brief mention of a supervisor's comments in last week's board meeting to let any further comments of election fraud go. Well, I can't do that. I, as an alternate member of the Citizens Election Advisory Committee, have taken an oath to support, uphold, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California. I take serious my civic duty to make my voice heard by my legal cast vote and citizen oversight to help ensure and protect the process is fair, honest, and transparent for all eligible Californians here in the San Joaquin County. The ROV's election integrity presentation is a good start, a baby step forward into the citizens' oversight into the elections, but it wasn't an all-encompassing answer to some of the things that are going on in our elections. There are many sources of election fraud that were not addressed and need to be. Many questions still remain. For example, a few of mine. Where is committee oversight? In a few short months, or in a month or so, the United States, along with the San Joaquin County, will have an election November 8th. And this committee will not meet again until January 2023. Again, I say, where's the transparency? Where's the oversight? I'm going to shorten this up because I only have a few more seconds. In closing, I ask that we get rid of the machines, clean up our voter registration rolls, help safeguard ballots to all eligible voters, and vote in person on the same day of the election. Be a VIP, vote in person.
Joni Shoemaker. You don't look like Joni.
Joni?
Okay.
Fine,
Jim Shoemaker.
Okay. Good morning, Board. In the finest traditions of a free people who like their liberties and can only maintain by eternal vigilance and the hard work of many laborers. My wife was here last week, who you just mentioned, spoke on behalf of maintaining voter integrity. She and many others that were here standing for the liberties and freedoms of the people of this county only wanted to know that our elections are fair and have integrity, were wrongly attacked by this board. Each of you, as an elected official, took an oath of office upon the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California. Both stand for a constitutional republic where we have the rule of law. This word has been thrown around quite loosely, and this board used it quite loosely last week. The rule of law for nearly 1,500 years in Western civilization was God's law. Over the last 100 years, rebellious men have undermined this fact and have tried to implement laws that go against the Constitution, which then goes against God's law, which the Constitution is to protect. We need to go back to paper ballots, hand counting, which under the law we can do and have control of at the county level. Now I'm going to switch subjects. On another subject, I would like to have the Board of Supervisors put a motion forward that our county is opposed to Prop 1 on the November ballot, that our board stands for innocent human life and will oppose the governor and the legislature if this passes. That no law should be able to contradict the law of God, for we shall all be judged and stand for. We must stand and protect unborn and give hope to the parents and support to the mother and to create and not to create two victims. People, we need to take a position. Stand for the people of this county, stand for the people that you represent, but also our government is going in the wrong direction. We're creating too many people, and this board does have oversight on financing and funding of many of these programs that will be implemented if this passes. So I'd like the board to take a position on that. Thank you.
Molly Watkins.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, here we go again. Printing more ballots, this time for Stockton Water District, East Water District. It's a huge district. It covers all of Stockton and the east side where I'm at, clear to the Calaveras County line. The last election, we had blurred ballots that we had to reprint. And before that, we had the Delta College trustee election that we had to reprint because we left a bunch of those people off. So my concern is not so much the mistake, but the confusion and chaos that this creates to print more ballots. We need to take custody of all of these wrong ballots and all of the newly printed ballots. There is a reason that organizations and businesses follow GAAP, G-A-A-P, General Acceptance Accounting Principles, for accounting money. Ballots are money. In our review, most people are honest, and we need to take the steps to follow the procedures to keep everybody honest. So I'd like to see the GAAP principles applied to all the ballots that we're reprinting. We need to keep track of all the ballots. Thank you.
Denise Aguilar.
Good morning, Board. My name is Denise Aguilar. I am president of San Joaquin County Liberty Coalition, and I first want to thank the board members who I worked with closely. Thank you, Miguel and Tom, for helping us defeat a statewide bill that would remove parental rights. However, I saw some of the video that happened with a little bit of gaslighting on election integrity, and it brought me back to here where I was earlier this year. We are still under a public health emergency. And I was promised by both a couple members of the board that if a resolution came forward to end the public health emergency, that this would happen. As you know, earlier in the year, there was a resolution brought, and then magically the Office of Emergency Services showed up to tell us how great it was for us to be under this public health emergency. And you, Supervisor Wynn, said you really enjoy being under this because it gives you the ability to allocate funds without the proper checks and balances. So I'm here again to ask that we bring a resolution to end the public health emergency. As you heard, the Biden administration said COVID is over. Masking, testing, vaccines, mandates are all gone. And we have put forward a FOIA request, public records request, and we are in the process of an audit right now for San Joaquin County of all the money that was spent and allocated under the public health emergency, specifically for Fulgent LLC, which we had a discussion on that before, how Fulgent is being used at all testing sites, and Fulgent is selling our DNA to the Chinese Communist Party. So I'm here to ask that a resolution come forward. COVID is over. There's no reason for us to be under a public health emergency, and I stand and support the people here who are asking for election integrity. This shouldn't be a big ask. This should be something that everybody is on board with because we need new checks and balances. The nation is going into the wrong direction, and I'm confident that San Joaquin County and the Board of Supervisors will do the right thing. You guys have done the right thing this past COVID pandemic, and I'm hoping that it continues. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, Clerk of the Board.
Thank you, Chairman. The first comment was submitted by Pierre Delecto that writes, County Council stated that California Code requires one drop box per 30,000 registered voters. According to the Register of Voters, we have 385,040 registered voters in San Joaquin County. Doing the math, we are required by the state to have 13 drop boxes. However, we have 25. Mail-in ballots are actually intended to be put in the actual mail. With all of the concerns regarding our elections, why would you spend more taxpayers' money to have almost twice the amount of drop boxes that we are required to have? Perhaps a prudent decision would be to get rid of additional drop boxes since they seem to be a source of contention. Reducing the number to 13 would also send the message to the community that they are in fact being heard. The next comment was submitted by Sam the Port fan. As a Stockton Port fan in attendance when the county employees were present, I'd like to set the record straight on two things. First, Tom Petty cannot throw a strike when he tossed out the first pitch, although on the second pitch he did cross the plate. I'd also like to express my support on the kind of person he is when bullied and when slandered and hateful insulting curse words were yelled at him by three big pretend tough guys. Instead of walking away after being directly insulted by these three Josh Harder bullies, Tom walked right up to all three and gave back to them exactly what they deserved. Tom showed then, and he shows now, that he's not going to be bullied. He's not going to be insulted, and he's not going to be pushed around. I applaud Tom for having courage to stand up to bullies. He's the kind of leader I support and appreciate. Next comment was submitted by Linda Joe, who writes, the formation of the Election Integrity Committee, as was suggested by Tom Patty, was a positive step forward in working collaboratively with the community to ensure faith in our election system. I am baffled by the comments from Tom Patty at the last meeting. Mr. Patty said the questions regarding election integrity had all been answered and that it was now time to, quote, move on. Please clarify. Is the Election Integrity Committee still in existence? It seems as if the proverbial plug has been pulled, as Mr. Patty has now declared that all is well with our entire election process. If that is the case, why did you waste public resources and the time, effort, and energy on the appointees on the committee? Next comment was submitted by Zachary John, who writes, Here's Supervisor Patty. We, the people of San Joaquin County, have listened to your advice regarding election integrity. We heard you wholeheartedly endorse our entire election system. Thank you for your input. We feel that the best fit for you and your expertise is to stick to the pigeon proclamations. Next comment was submitted by Tyler Scott, who writes, This comment is in response to Supervisor Patty's suggestion that constituents desiring election integrity should just, quote, move on, end quote. We will not bend, we will not break, we will not yield. We will never give in. We will never give up. We will never back down. We will never, ever surrender. Credit given President Donald J. Trump for that awesome quote. Next comment was submitted by Colleen O'Connell, who writes, Jenny Craig, Manteca, independent small business franchise. My business relocated to Manteca during the pandemic, July 2020, from 10 years in Oakdale. Although Jenny Craig was essential, my gym, Curves, was shut down. My vibrant businesses took a financial hit. My highly trained staff of 3 lost their jobs, and I, owner, coach, continued operations with Jenny Craig by myself. Pivoting the location, the city of Manteca received the approval of Jenny Craig Corporate. Rebuilding has been my focus. The RAD card benefited my business because it benefited my clients. Their goals were weight loss. They stretched their matched funds over more weeks. $200 became $400 in matched funds. For example, a week of food cost $170. By applying $50 from the RAD card, it brought the cost down to $120 per week. This brought additional revenue to my business because we increased the number of weeks of food purchased. My clients benefited because they had the time necessary to follow through with their goals. We also now have a part-time Jenny Craig coach since December 2021, who has completed her 9 months of certification training. We, Jenny Craig Manteca, and our clients, new or returning, highly suggest helping small businesses again. Thank you. Next comment was submitted anonymously and writes, I had jury duty last week, and what a mess. I left in plenty of time, or so I thought. Went to the suggested parking structure, 10 cars in line, and they put up a full sign. Try to find the next parking lot on the list, and it was a permitted parking lot. Then the list takes me under Highway 4 to the homeless camp, and then further south into a homeless parking lot. Finally made to the 5th suggestion, which is the one half a block from the courthouse. I would kindly suggest that the jury commission add some kind of notice to the jury duty notification of where there is safe and secure parking. I almost went home and said to heck with it. Those of us that do not frequent downtown Stockton, it is a nightmare with the one-way streets, the homeless, and the lack of direction from the jury commissioner. Next comment submitted this morning writes, Thank you, Tom Patty, for always working on the important issues in this county and not playing politics like other board members. I appreciate Tom's public service and heart for the community. This board should stop trying to undermine a public servant and should get back to working on issues we all care about. The next comment was submitted by William, who writes, Board, first I would like to address how embarrassing it is watching these meetings. If you all can't get it together, no wonder our county is suffering. We the people want free and fair elections. No machines, no drop boxes. There is so much evidence throughout our county of voter fraud. We have all been lied to and manipulated, and we need to come together to change things. What we have experienced the last 2 years is the consequence of a stolen election. You are supposed to represent the people, and it's clear that's not why you are in those positions. It's disgraceful. The next comment was submitted by Araceli, who writes, "Good morning, board. I'm writing once again to voice concerns over the corruption in our elections. We need to stop using the compromised machines. Do not replace them. Stop using the drop boxes paid for by dirty money. We need to fix the voter rolls, go back to in-person one-day voting, and hand count. We want free and fair elections. Thank you to the Citizens Committee for your volunteer time. I'm sorry to hear that you all are not able to complete the task at hand in the current scenario. Hopefully this will be addressed." The next comment was submitted by Anonymous, who writes, "Good morning, board. So I watched last week's board meeting, and I just have to say how disappointed I am with San Joaquin County and the job they're doing. You guys pat yourselves on the back like you guys are doing a good job, but you guys really aren't. First thing, I don't understand why you guys want to wait until after the election to upgrade the voting machines. Like, that just tells us right there what we already know to be true. I also love how everybody has their trolls that come in and speak for them. We've seen right through that one. Photo op after photo op with this board, same with this whole county, the police, the mayor included, and the sheriff. Well, that's just embarrassing to even talk about, with his fear-mongering tactics and wasting taxpayer money to fill his pockets. I would also like to say, need I remind people we have a First Amendment right to freedom of speech, no matter how much social media censors us. Tom's just mad he can't bully someone for writing in because he doesn't know who it is. Same for Kathy." The next comment was submitted by Joe Ferrari, who writes, "A water board candidate has been left off midterm election ballots. How many will you reprint to take care of this problem? Or are you going to do what you did last time and reprint all ballots after you told us you only reprinted 31%? Is this the new norm? Is it a new tool? Finding or creating new reasons to reprint ballots? When will the last minute reprint stop? By 2024? Maybe not. The first time the reprint happened, it was in response to a defective component of the computerized vote counting system, and oops, it exposed that the system's ballot barcodes are an Achilles heel, and that computerized vote counting isn't better than human vote counting. After all, your computerized count system is supposedly verified using human hand counts as the fail-safe standard. So your 1% human test actions, you tactfully concede that humans are reliable tools for vote counting, or else this comparison would not be made. Also, hand counts avoid reprints caused by barcode problems. I am requesting that only hand counts of paper ballots happen from now on. Most of us voters don't trust the machines and their supposed security, no matter how many company man presentations are given, or hand count cost alarmism by the ROV. Reestablishing a full hand count of all elections from this point forward would be the first step in regaining the trust and saving." The next comment was submitted by Darius Cook, who writes, "Regarding the integrity of our elections, please force the cleaning up of our voter rolls and eliminate the use of all voting via electronic machines or mail-in ballots. Go back to people voting only at polling places on a paper ballot. Our voter rolls are a ridiculous mess." The next comment was submitted by Holly Moore, who writes, "Dirty elections begin with dirty rolls. Our voter rolls are packed with ghosts. Ghosts are fake voters who don't exist. I was able to register my dog Stanley to vote because online registration does not require ID or a signature. I stopped before committing a felony, but many do not. If I was able to register my dog, what would stop someone from creating thousands of fake voters? It takes little imagination to see George Soros creating ghosts to sway an election. When was the last time the voter rolls were cleaned? How do we know if votes are coming from real people or ghosts? Do you think ghosts don't exist here in San Joaquin County? Then you'd be wrong. Upon recent examination of our rolls, I found dead voters, ghost voters, streets and addresses that don't exist, and a nursing home where every single person's birth date was wrong. Those were not clerical errors, those are crimes. There should not be one unlawful voter on our rolls. We must enact regular, timely cleaning to keep Casper the unfriendly ghost out of elections so the true voice of the voters can be heard. And we must punish those who create ghost voters to unlawfully change elections. Thank you." The next comment was submitted anonymously, who writes, "Dirty voter rolls create major opportunities for election fraud. A recent Heritage Foundation report gave California very poor marks for the accuracy of its voter rolls, its poor voter identification, and a lack of citizenship verification. Recent surveys show that probably 8 to 10% and perhaps 20% of entries in the rolls in San Joaquin County are for fictional ghost voters or voters who are otherwise ineligible. These ghosts are very difficult to detect and eliminate from the rolls. Mass voter drives, registration by mail, and other methods make it easy to insert ghosts into the rolls, and once present, they are difficult to remove. These ghosts form a reservoir of voters that can be used to influence or even determine the outcome of an election. Since the creators of these ghosts also have the signature information they used, printing a matching signature image on a return envelope ensures that their ballots will be passed on for counting. Since they are in the rolls, they will be sent ballots by mail, just like legitimate voters. While the creation of ghost voters and ballots is illegal, there's almost no chance that their creators can be caught, as the only identifying information is for the ghost voter. This makes election manipulation simple, low risk, and hard to detect. Although the activity is illegal, you can't prosecute what you can't detect. Our Register of Voters did not address this issue in her presentation last week. The next comment was also submitted anonymously and writes, at the last board meeting, the Register of Voters presented a video that purported to show that there was no wireless connection existing between the election system and the outside world. I have several decades of experience with radio frequency systems, including cellular, Wi-Fi, and others. The video was seriously flawed in many respects, deceptively concluding that no connection existed. A RF sniffer was presented that was purported to measure any radio frequency signals present. There was no mention of the frequencies being examined. A Geiger counter-like clicking noise was present, presumably indicating signal strength or activity, but that was not made clear. There was no indication that the equipment being examined was actually operating. If it was operating, it would have been doing so for some time prior to the video. In many systems, wireless activity is most present when the systems start and explore their environment for other wireless systems. If no other systems are found, many devices will passively listen for activity. When they are listening, they will give little or no indication of their presence to a sniffer device. Furthermore, intelligent wireless systems can be directed by software to turn off their wireless interfaces, much like airplane mode in a cell phone. If the wireless capacity had been turned off, there would also be no activity for a sniffer to detect. Those are only a few of the issues that made the video presentation both meaningless and deceptive. The next comment was submitted by Martha Snyder, who writes, good morning. My name is Martha Snyder, veteran and Stockton, San Joaquin County resident. I regret that I could not be with you this morning. In my public comment, I would like to thank Chairman Nguyen and the board for the brief comment after I spoke on September 27th. I was excited to attend the SJC Veteran Advisory Commission meeting that very evening at American Legion Post 190 in Ripon. While VSO Susan Ferry emailed of the meeting's cancellation at 5:08 p.m., I did not receive that information until I called Susan from Ripon at 5:45. Two other veterans beside me were ready for a public meeting. Chairman Roots apparently tried to get the vice chair to continue with the meeting. Yet bottom line is a public meeting was canceled without ample notice to the public, a Brown Act violation. Since the commission has at least 2 vacant seats and lacks the ability to communicate with the public, it appears to be a body in name only. A check on the board's box that you say you support veterans, but there is no substance to the claim. While HCSA Director Greg Diederich, Matt Garber, the VSO, myself, and 2 veterans from Post 16 met in Zoom on September 28, there was not much said to suggest communications from the public will improve before November, if then. Communication with veterans must improve. Until then, more and more veterans will just show up and email the board directly regarding our concerns. Thank you. The next comment was submitted anonymously and writes, I understand that there is already a problem with the ballots, that the water board candidates are not on certain ballots. What the heck? So are we having the ROV print more ballots once again? We can't even get answers on what happened to the duplicate ballots that were done for all ballots on the blurry barcodes on the extra ones. Where are they? What is the chain of command? The last comment was also submitted anonymously and writes, why did the BOS call in Austin for the recall, as he was certified and Olivia was not? But for the primary, we did not call him in, and Olivia was not certified until 3 weeks after the election was certified. Is that legal, or was the election really not certified? And Chairman Nguyen, that concludes our public comments at this time.
Chairman Nguyen, if you will, I'd like to set the record straight on public comment. Wrongfully, the credit was given to me by one of the public comments about the Citizen Election Review Committee. That I think was your idea. It was a great idea, and it was incorporated. I was wrongfully given credit for that for one of the people that wrote in anonymously, I believe. So the credit belongs to you. You started that committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Patty. Anyone else in the audience wishing to speak? Okay, seeing none, moving on to the next item. This is essentially a discussion item. And
If I could do a point of order real quick.
Sure.
I'm going to request that we move the discussion regarding Prop 172, public safety sales tax allocation, to the discussion first. One of the reasons being, I know Supervisor Villapudua has to leave, and we have many chiefs of our fire agencies here that I'm sure have other things that they need to do. So I would request that that be heard first.
Okay. I'll just check County Council. I assume we can make those adjustments. Okay. All right. We'll hear that agenda item first. So, Mr. Wolverding.
Thank you, Chair Nguyen. I'd like to invite Brenda Kiley down, our Chief Deputy County Administrator, who has a presentation on Prop 172, and she may need a moment to come here because she wasn't expecting the rearrangement in the order of the agenda item.
Sure. Thank you.
Good morning, members of the board, County Council. I'm Brenda Kiley, Chief Deputy County Administrator, and I'm here to present the Proposition 172 Public Safety Sales Tax discussion. During the 22-23 final budget hearings, your board directed the County Administrator to bring back proposals within the current fiscal year to include fire districts in the Proposition 172 allocation, both in the base allocation and as a percentage of revenue growth. This presentation will include the background on Proposition 172 revenue and will provide options for the board to consider. Proposition 172 was established in 1993 as a statewide half-cent sales tax to provide funding for qualified public safety programs. Its purpose was to replace property taxes that were shifted from local agencies to local school districts as part of the 1993-94 state budget called Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund, or ERAF. In 1992-93, approximately $34.3 million in property tax revenues were shifted from San Joaquin County to schools. Revenue from Proposition 172 backfilled approximately $18.7 million, or slightly more than half of the revenues that were lost in 1992-93. To reiterate, this was only a partial backfill at that time and didn't make San Joaquin County whole. Continuing on with background related to fire districts. The property tax shift that occurred in 1993-94 excluded fire districts, and San Joaquin County does not fund a county fire department. In a 1994 letter to the County Fire Chiefs Association from Douglas Wilhoit, former chairman of the Board of Supervisors, Mr. Wilhoit explained why fire districts were not eligible for Proposition 172 funding. He said, quote, Proposition 172 monies are intended to partially offset the property tax loss to counties and cities in the 1993-94 fiscal year. Because fire districts lost no property tax in 1993-94 and in fact received more than $328,000 in 1993-94 than in 1992-93, they are not entitled to receive Proposition 172. Continuing on with the quote, in addition, the county budget does not fund a county fire department. Consequently, no reduction was made by the County Board of Supervisors to fire protection services. Therefore, no Proposition 172 funds were allocated to fire protection services. These statements are still applicable today. According to Government Code Section 30052, services eligible to receive Proposition 172 revenue include sheriff, police, fire protection, county district attorneys, county corrections, and ocean lifeguards. The current program allocation formula for the county was established by the Board of Supervisors on May 24, 1994, which allocates Proposition 172 revenue to the sheriff at 68.1%, to probation at 13%, to the district attorney at 11%, to the public defender court-assigned counsel at 7.9%. For purposes of this discussion, court-assigned counsel is included in the public defender's allocation. Also, substance abuse services was formerly part of probation, but is now part of healthcare services. The percentage that's allocated to this program is 0.3%, and it is included in probation's 13% for this discussion. The percentage and corresponding amount budgeted for fiscal year 22-23 are presented in the table on the slide before you. During 1920, which was about 3 years ago, the County Administrator's Office, working with Law and Justice Departments, reviewed the current program allocation formula again and determined the percentage of allocation distributed to each department was appropriate and consistent with Proposition 172's original intent. So it was reviewed again just a few years ago. Because the county budget does not fund a county fire department, fire protection was not included in the original allocation of Proposition 172.
Brenda, can I jump in for a second? Before Brenda discusses the proposed options that are going to come up before you, I just wanted to give you a high-level overview of what Brenda was talking about when Prop 172 came about as a result of the ERAF shift. She'd mentioned that it was less than half of the amount that was shifted away from education, and that was a smaller amount. It was like $34 million and $18 million. Well, the same still holds true today. And one of the other things that the legislature did to try to avoid the counties reducing their law and justice expenditures down to the 172, they put in what was called a maintenance of effort, an MOE. And the MOE is about 125% of the Prop 172 money. So in order to get the 172 money, you've got to spend at least 125% of what you have coming in the 172. Now, the county expends far more than that because the county's priority with law and justice is to keep our residents and our constituents safe. So what we tend to do is we expend far more than what our MOE is already. And for the coming year, for example, real numbers, our expenditure for public safety is related to this is $260 million approximately. Our maintenance of effort that we have to spend is $120 million, and we're getting approximately $100 million in Prop 172 money. So why is that important, and what does that mean? What that means is we're getting less than half of what we're actually spending for this law and justice related activity, and we're having to fill the balance out of the county's general fund. So anything that we're going to hear from this point forward that we take away from Prop 172 for the county's law and justice, dollar for dollar, will eventually come out of the county's general fund. So I just wanted you all to keep that in mind as we go through the presentation. Thank you, Brenda.
Supervisor Miller.
Thank you. Just a quick point of order. By moving this up to the beginning of the meeting, we've effectively are going to be having this discussion without the opportunity for either the sheriff or the district attorney or the probation director or the public defender or anybody else to provide what could be really pertinent information to the board before we make a decision. So I would like to suggest, if it's at least possible, to have the clerk of the board reach out to them and let them know that this has been moved up, so that if they want to come down here and address the board can get their input before we make any decisions. I mean, these are huge dollar amounts. And I have to assume that the sheriff and the rest of them may have some input for the board before we talk about redirecting this funding. Thank you.
Good point. So, Clerk, could you have somebody check with the sheriff, chief probation officer, obviously those that are affected by this?
I will, and I do believe that they do watch the meetings, so they may be aware that it's happening, but I will reach out and send them an email.
All right. Mr. Wolverine?
That was all that I had. I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Kiley. Thank you.
Sounds good. Okay. Now I will review several options for your board to consider. It is important to note that any revenue that is shifted from existing departments will either need to be backfilled with general fund revenue or could potentially result in a reduction in service levels. So option 1 is to allocate 1% of the base revenue in 23-24, so that would be next year, to fire districts, which would decrease the allocations to the existing departments. If a 3% growth factor is applied to the total revenue for 23-24, an allocation of 1% would equal approximately $1 million rounded. The resulting allocations are reflected in the chart on the slide. You'll see that the total estimated Proposition 172 revenue is $102.5 million in 23-24, which is $3 million greater than the current budget of $99.5 million. So on the prior slide, you saw the $99.5 million. This is the projection for 23-24. In the columns titled Before Shift, you'll see the current allocation without the fire districts. So that's what the current allocation that I presented in the prior slide. The columns shifted or titled After Shift reflect the percentages and amount of revenue, including the $1 million for fire districts. So we have the before and after. It's necessary to reduce each department's percentage of revenue in order to shift revenue to the fire districts. For example, before the shift, the sheriff's office would receive 68.1% or $69.8 million. And after the shift, they would receive 67.4% or $69.1 million. The $1 million would be allocated to fire districts based upon their Assembly Bill 8 or AB 8 property tax allocation percentages as shown in the next slide. AB 8 allocations are based upon the proportion of taxes for each district that were in place prior to Proposition 13. Okay, moving on to option 2. Option 2 is to allocate 0.5% or 0.5% of the base revenue in 23-24 to fire districts, which would decrease the allocations to the existing departments. 0.5% would equal approximately $500,000. The resulting allocations are reflected in the chart on the slide. Again, you'll see the percentages before and after the shift of funding to the fire districts. The $500,000 would be allocated to the fire districts based upon their AB 8 property tax allocation percentages as shown on the next slide. And then option 3 is to allocate 10% of the growth in Prop 172 revenue to fire districts annually. So if we used a 3% growth estimate for 23-24, which is what I've been using in the other options, the growth amount would equal approximately $3 million countywide or $300,000 for the fire district. So this is just a percentage of the growth. Every year thereafter, 10% of the growth would be shifted to fire districts, and in the event there's a reduction, the fire districts would also share in the reduction. Using this methodology, the new allocation for 23-24 is reflected in the chart on the slide. If this option is chosen, it is recommended that the allocation be capped at a certain percent of the base allocation, for instance, like 1%. So what I mean by that is if we are going to choose option 3 and we're allocating growth, we at some point should cap it at a certain percentage of the base. The $300,000 would be allocated to fire districts based upon their AB 8 property tax allocation percentages as shown on this slide. Okay. So this slide presents a side-by-side comparison pardon me, of the first 3 options just presented. The AB 8, I'm sorry, the AB 8 allocation methodology is the most equitable way to distribute these funds, but does, Sorry, I should have brought my water. AB8 methodology is the most equitable way to distribute these funds, but doesn't provide significant amounts of funding for most fire districts. On the table, the blue highlighted row depicts the district with the most funding. So you see the blue highlighted row. The pink highlighted row depicts the district with the least amount of funding. Using this methodology, we believe the only way to allocate a meaningful amount to the fire districts would be to carve out a much bigger total allocation. And as Jay pointed out earlier, because the funding requirements for public safety departments are so great, each dollar that is shifted to fire districts will ultimately come from the general fund. So we just wanted to show you the three options side by side that we just presented. So you could see Tracy Rural Fire is the district that would receive the most, and then that Collegeville Rural Fire receives the least. And then finally turning to our option 4. Option 4 is to continue to exclude the fire districts from the allocation. As stated previously, the intent of the Proposition 172 sales tax was to partially replace the property taxes that were shifted from local agencies to school districts as part of the 1993-94 state budget agreement. As Mr. Will Hoyt, former chairman of the board, explained, quote, because fire districts lost no property tax in 1993-94 and in fact received more than $328,000 in 93-94 than 92-93, they're not entitled to receive Proposition 172 money, end quote. And in addition, San Joaquin County doesn't fund a county fire department. It is recommended that the board consider adopting option 4, which will not shift Proposition 172 revenue from existing public safety departments to fund fire districts. Okay, so this concludes our presentation, and I have Sandy Regalo, Assistant County Administrator, here with me at the staff table. At this point, we will entertain questions from the board and receive direction regarding Proposition 172, sales tax allocations.
Questions from the board? None? So just a quick, I guess, observation. So essentially what we're doing by this is we're kind of indirectly using the general fund to fund whatever the cost would be to fire districts, correct?
Correct.
All right. Supervisor Miller.
Thank you. Are you just looking for direction from us, or are we looking to take action on this, or what are we being asked?
Well, Supervisor Miller, through the chair, the request had been for the county administrator's office to come back with a proposal and a recommendation as to what we might do. We did the analysis we were requested to do, which is what Ms. Kiley just went through. And what we're trying to explain here, I guess, are three things. Mm-hmm. One, that Prop 172 was here to backfill the loss to the counties, all counties. Number two, while fire is included, we don't have a county fire department, which would have been impacted. As former Supervisor Will Hoyt had mentioned, they weren't impacted with any loss, so therefore they wouldn't be included in any additional gain. I'm not sure the board may have been aware of that when we were provided this direction. And so we did our homework. We threw out some scenarios, as Ms. Kiley had just done, and then we're coming back with a recommendation, and we're recommending that the board take no action and leave Prop 172 as it currently is. So that's our recommendation.
Great, thank you. I do support option number 4, and so I would, at this time, put a motion on the floor to go with option 4 and not shift the funds for the reasons provided by our county administrator's office, especially in light of the fact that we've really been struggling with recruitment and retention issues at all levels in our public safety. I think the timing is wrong to do an off-the-top shift of their funding. If there are specific costs that the county needs to address that the rural fire districts are providing, then I think we can look at those on a direct cost reimbursement basis. But for now, I would make a motion to go with option number 4.
If you would hold that, and then I have a question from the board, and then I'd like to have public comment before we actually act upon that. Vice Chair Rickman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would love to hear from the fire department chiefs. We have many of them here. But just to remind this board, and we're talking about the general fund, we already approved $500,000. And one of the reasons being for the unprotected areas. And I keep hearing this over and over and over again, that, you know, the excuse of the county doesn't have a county fire department, so therefore we're not responsible for whatever it may be. However, you know, there are special districts and rural districts, as you saw in the breakdown of where the funding was supposed to go. And you look at Mr. Wilhoit, great guy, love the guy. And that was written in 92, 93, 94, around there, and he was chair of the board. Look at the population of San Joaquin County, then look at San Joaquin County now. Those of you that have ever traveled on the unincorporated areas or our country roads out there outside the city limit, who do you think responds to those? Our fire department, right? One of the things that I had an issue with, and I've had an issue for some time, and one of the issues, or one of the reasons I asked this board and the board approved funding for our fire department to respond to unprotected areas. Those of you that are familiar with Highway 4, for example, and that's just one of the areas that are unprotected in the San Joaquin County. And right now, there is no fire response unless, you know, there's a, you know, say a motor vehicle accident in which, say, somebody's trapped in the vehicle. And then usually what happens, law enforcement personnel would arrive on scene and then inform their dispatch, would inform fire dispatch, and then they would roll a fire unit. So now you're looking at a huge, huge delay in fire response. I mean, could you imagine if your loved one is in one of these county roads, unprotected areas, and then, you know, their car goes in the water, or they get in a traffic accident and they're trapped in the vehicle and you don't have somebody responding right away because it's an unprotected area? This is one of the things that I think we need funding to resolve. And if you look back in the early 90s, of the traffic that are used in our unincorporated roadways or our country roads compared to now, you know, we all have seen it, right? I know in my district, I receive many traffic complaints from residents throughout my district of people bypassing the freeways and using unincorporated roadways to try to bypass traffic and get on. So at one time when we had no traffic or very little traffic on our unincorporated roadways, that's a time long gone. And it's very congested. Those of you that live off of Roberts Road, for example, see it, or off of Highway 4, Byron Road, San Jose, Bird Road, Casson Road, Airport Road, Durham Ferry Road. I can sit here for the next 30 minutes and just go unincorporated or roadway after roadway after roadway, in which we're seeing issues with more and more traffic on roadways that aren't designed to house that much traffic. And again, with more traffic, more people, we have more emergency responses. And I want to make sure, and again, and I've said it time and time before, you know, one of our primary duties is to keep our residents safe. I want to make sure that our fire department has the resources and the funding to respond to emergency accidents to protect you, our families, and motorists that passing through our area. So with that being said, Chair, I would love to hear from our fire department.
Any other questions? Okay, let me open up public comment. Chief Bidders, I see you getting up.
Thank you, Honorable Board of Supervisors, for the opportunity to comment on this. I've been in the fire service for 40 years. I've been a chief officer for 28 years, which means that I inherited this. The minute I became a chief officer, Prop 172 and ERAF shifts were the talk of the town. So ERAF shifts are what caused all this, and that was a state shift of dollars, as has been talked about. And I'd like to thank, first of all, Jay and his staff, both at the CAO's office and the Auditor Controller's office, because that's where I get my information from. ERAF is a substantial hit to all the fire districts. I keep hearing it said that we didn't lose any money. We did lose money. I realize there's a difference between ERAF and Prop 172 receipts, but just so you understand, ERAF has cost the Ripon Fire District a huge amount of money. Now, the last report that I had went through 2019, because that's the last time I pulled it, was after, at the end, I think the beginning of 2021, and it takes a while to get this information. But in 2019, the Ripon Fire District lost $176,000 to ERAF. So that was our loss. From 2000 to 2019, we've lost over $2.5 million to ERAF shifts. So there is a loss. So I don't understand what the comment about that we never lost anything, because we did. I remember when Prop 172 was on the ballot, it was specifically said that it was to replace ERAF losses. And we went out and campaigned for it. We went out and talked to people. There was some things that happened that the Prop 172 was really supposed to result in a negative increase to the taxpayer because of another tax that sunsetted. So it passed by 58%, I believe, at the time, and we expected that we would get some release from ERAF, which we never have. Why are we in the position we're in? Proposition 13, another great piece of legislation, which is very helpful for us as homeowners, but the allocation of the tax dollar from Proposition 13 was inequitable in the fact that it depended on how much money each district spent 3 years prior to the passage of Prop 13. So a district like Ripon, we spent no money. We fixed our own engines. We did everything ourselves. We got a very small allocation. Other districts are up in the 30% range. So there's some real inequities there. I think that there's a lot of misinformation, and I think, or not misinformation, but I think either inaccurate or not consistent information. The numbers that I got on losses come right straight from the state of California and from the county's auditor's office. I would like to see a bigger discussion of what the real facts are, and so we know, and we understand that taking money from one to give to another isn't necessarily always the right thing either, and we understand the impacts of what we're talking about here, but we'd like you to look at this a little bit deeper so we can understand what the real costs are. Thank you.
Quick question, Chief Bidders. I understand that there's a discussion in regards to funding hazmat. Is that correct? Could you elaborate on that a little bit as far as the fire districts?
There is. So the fire in the unincorporated area of the county, the fire districts don't have any responsibility legally to supply hazmat services. The county has that responsibility. Just like if a district went bankrupt, if Ripon Fire went bankrupt, the county would have to pick up that responsibility to provide fire protection in that area in some way, somehow, however they did it, contract with somebody else, do whatever. So hazmat has been an ongoing battle in this county for many years, ever since they moved hazmat out of the Office of Emergency Services and into the Department of Health Services. They kind of call it split the baby. And it's been a struggle to provide that level of service. It's one of those things that you don't need until you need it really bad. So you have the train derailment or something like that. The fire districts have a great deal of resources and trained personnel that we would like to see if we can salvage that training, because once we lose it, it's gone. So we've been working with the CAO's office looking at how we can help the county. We can work in partnership with the county to provide a hazardous material response capability that may be a bridge to a bigger regional response if there was a large incident. Then we may get resources from the state of California. But the everyday occurrences. So we've met with the county administrator and are in the process of getting some budgetary numbers of what it would cost, because it's not our liability, it's not our responsibility to do it, and there's a great deal of expense there for equipment and training. For us to move forward with that and support the county, we would need financial support from the county to provide for equipment and training, not necessarily startup costs, but restart-up costs, because a lot of the equipment that the county owns right now is either out of date, out of calibration, out of service. It all needs to be reevaluated, and we're in the process of doing that now.
So what you're basically asking for is I guess a revamping of the hazmat system countywide. Certainly, obviously, is the board's very concerned about the residents that we provide public safety for. So this would be something that all fire districts within the county, I think I've got 11 in my district alone. So this would be something that all those districts throughout the county that service county residents would be eligible to participate in. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. One way or the other, some districts wouldn't necessarily have people that are trained to the hazardous material specialist level, but they may have people that could support in other areas, support that level of delivery. So the idea is that we used to call it the joint team. I think it's still out there. There's a joint hazmat team, which is a resource in the county. It just hasn't been used in a while because there's not been a lot of leadership. And we're trying to restore that leadership. We're going to restore that structure using what we've already put together. And that's a separate issue to, it's kind of like the unincorporated area. It's a separate issue to solving some issues that could happen in the county that the county would be basically responsible for to mitigate if they don't have a responsible party. With respect to the unincorporated area, I think, I know that my district, and I only speak for my district, there's been times when the question has come up about who's going to respond to an accident in the unincorporated area where we need extrication. And while some departments may have said we're not going to go, Ripon Fire has always said we'll go, even though it's a 45-minute response for us. We'll go. You call, we haul. That's what we do. And we have responded out to that area when requested with our ambulance or with our engines. It hasn't been a lot, but that's the attitude with which we provide the service. Is it's the whole county. It's obviously we need to take care of our district, but we don't know. I think like Supervisor Rickman said, we don't know who's in that car. It could be my wife coming back from the outlets for all I know. So we try to do the best we can all the time. And I think that's what we're looking at all of these things is we're trying to do the best we can, but we're so impacted by, legislature. All the things that they're done to try to fix things have hurt special districts. Special districts have never been embraced by anybody other than just please provide the service. We don't get money from highways and byways from the state like cities do. Yet we service all the accidents that happen on those roads. We don't get, there's a lot of things we don't get paid for, but they keep taking money away from us. So, my comment is if everybody just gave us back the money that they stole from us, we wouldn't ever have to ask for money. But it seems like we keep getting the death of 1,000 cuts. And now we're at the point where we have to look at starting to cut service levels. And so we understand that Prop 172 is a touchy thing, and we certainly aren't out there looking to take money away from our sheriff, take money away from things that are needed. But the fact is, in the beginning, it was meant to go to fire safety as well, fire services as well. And I think some people wordsmithed that and said, well, we don't have fire protection in the county, so we're not responsible. But if you look at other counties right now, Solano County is a good example. They're going back and addressing this and trying to make this whole. I don't know what the answer is, but I sure wish that we could just be at the table when we talk about this, and that answer may not come today, but if we could be at the table instead of just be sitting in the back of the room when this discussion happens, I think we would all learn a lot, and me too, because I know what I've learned institutionally, but I'm sure that there's some facts that maybe I don't know.
Another question, Chief. Are you still the only EMT certified training facility in the county, or are there others?
We don't hold that licensure anymore with the county EMS agency. It was very expensive for us to maintain that, and it was very hard to do. And with our reduced staffing levels, it's I guess an effect of the lack of dollars to hire additional people. It's too hard on one small staff to provide that. So we can't provide that right now. We'd like to go back and do that in the future, but we have not been able to do that for several years now.
So where's the closest training for EMT or paramedic currently?
Modesto, probably.
Okay. Are they still going to consume this or over to the East Bay?
Well, it depends if you're talking about EMT, which is BLS or ALS paramedics. Paramedics are a little bit tougher. Sacramento, NCTI, something like that. Some of the colleges, some of the colleges have a paramedic program. EMT, same thing, but the closest EMT program I know of is in Modesto Junior College, and I don't know of anything closer. There was a private entity in Modesto that was doing it, and I haven't heard if they're still in business or not.
The reason I raise that question is because obviously EMS and certainly the various fire departments that have ALS or BLS trained firefighters, it's important that we have adequate training close by to fill the vacancies that all of you are experiencing. And I raise these two issues primarily, and Vice Chair Rickman talked about uncovered areas, and obviously we provided funds to assist fire agencies who would respond to those basically out-of-district calls types things. Is that I see, and I could go on, for example, I've got a fire district in my district that's possibly going to go out of business. And the reason I bring that up is because in talking with county council and the CEO's office, et cetera, there's no mechanism by which we can provide money. For example, as you know, some fire districts have asked for property tax increases to cover their obviously increased calls, those types of things. And I raise this issue from the stand, and I'm just again wanting to protect those small fire districts that have a challenge in regards to, because we have talked about, for example, the potential, which has been asked for maybe a bridge loan, to allow them to sustain their operations until they can put something on the ballot to increase their revenues so they can actually continue as a fire district. I think that's important because I think residents believe that, as they do in not just in the city of Ripon, but your district itself, is that individuals, residents prefer their local agencies to respond because, one, it's timing, but more importantly, as with Ripon, the public knows you and your department very well. So again, it's just a question in regards to, if we're talking about general fund money, my question would be, is there a better way to satisfy, as you've articulated, a current need to improve the quality of service to our residents, whether it be hazmat or paramedic training or whatever it happened to be? I'm sure you have a much longer list than I can come up with. So anyway, that's just a question in regards to, if the county is going to fund through the general fund, essentially, forget 172, because as you talked about, that raises us versus them. It does, for example, how does the sheriff feel about losing, $700,000 and et cetera? So I'm kind of thinking in terms of maybe there's a better way to use general fund money for specific projects that would benefit all the unincorporated fire districts to provide better service, as Vice Chair Rickman talks about, in regards to maintaining at least their service level and possibly upgrading it. So, and that's just the reason I asked the question. So thank you.
I appreciate that very much, and I think we're not asking for a handout; we're asking for a hand. There's a difference.
Right.
I think that that's what we would like to just be at the table and have the county look at us as we are. I think we've told the supervisors we are your fire chiefs. We're your fire departments for all the people that you serve. And although we're different, we're the same. And we work really hard together to try to fill each other's gaps and holes the best we can. But as you well know, sometimes some districts have bigger holes than others. We don't get volunteers like we used to. Ripon used to have 65 volunteers. We have 5.
Right.
You just can't get them anymore, and they can't do the state mandated training. They can't do the hours. They can't do the time. So it's really easy to go out for a tax measure for the public to say, well, you should just get more volunteers. Okay, well, and I think I had a predecessor who would tell people all the time, give us your money or give us your time as a volunteer department. Right. Well, people don't want to give their time because it's a lot of time, and they have families and they have other things. So, Ripon being the first advanced life support service in the county, that makes us the longest running advanced life support service in the county, both ambulance and fire. We've seen a huge swing in the way the system works, but we've stayed with it the whole time and tried to continue to offer that level of service, that high level of service. But as the resource side continues to dry up, we're challenged more and more. Obviously, an ambulance reimbursement is a real challenge right now, because managed care, we're getting paid pennies on the dollar for the services that we're providing.
Okay.
But I appreciate the question.
Thank you, Chief.
Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, Supervisor Patty.
I'm wondering if, I know we've heard some, just briefly from one person, public comment. We've heard that there's, I have unincorporated areas. I know there's a motion on the table, but I think CAO is also hearing, as you point out, Chairman, there are certain needs that may need to be met. So I'm wondering if maybe we can table this in consideration of a time constraint we have as it relates to Supervisor Villapudois and the next issue that this just superseded, but for consideration of the board, or if there's a point of order to do that, I would ask that maybe CAO's office work with the fire chiefs, and as you point out, Chairman, address some of the actual needs that they might need, that they've identified, especially service in unincorporated areas and areas where they might be losing money.
Okay, all right. Just Chief Bradley?
Yeah, and I appreciate and thank you, Supervisor Patty, for trying to guide this in the right direction. But I was hoping that I could speak just briefly. I think there's been a lot of misinformation that has been provided. I don't think it's done intentionally. I think it gets really confusing. But I just want to be very clear. The fire districts in this county, number one, they are your fire department. You don't have a county fire department. And to marginalize the fire districts in this county by stating because they're not a county fire department that somehow they're not entitled to public safety funds, it really goes against the grain of what public safety is all about. The second point is, it was very clear in 1993 that this was for fire and law enforcement and other public safeties, DA and probation. But we fought hard in I've been here a long time. We fought hard for 172 to be passed. We used the fires in Southern California to get it passed. We showed it daily on TVs. We walked door to door to get this passed. And I think the other thing that is totally a misrepresentation is that somehow we're taking money from the sheriff. We're not taking money from the sheriff. We're looking at future revenues. It might be an opportunity cost for the sheriff, but he doesn't have the money right now. I mean, we're looking at an extra $3 million next year, and what the proposal is that you would take one of those $3 million and begin to give some of that to fire districts. It's only fair. And it was a misrepresentation in 1993 when you said the fire districts lost no money. The fire districts have lost millions of dollars in ERAF. And all the things that you're talking about, why we can't provide services, that's a direct reflection on the loss of ERAF dollars. And so this idea that we're going to go back and we're going to sit back and, hey, we need to look at this and we need to look at, paramedic programs and all these other things. You need to start giving the money back to the fire districts who deserve this from 1993. I mean, we're not asking for you to take money away from anybody. We're asking for your future revenues to give us a piece of that. And you could tie it to the future revenues. If you don't get 3% next year and $3 million, then we don't get anything. But if you get $5 million, give us a third of that. So we're just asking for what's due to us. It's always been due to us, and the county's not done it. One last point, Stanislaus County, your counterparts over there, recognize this. They took affirmative action. $1.4 million goes to the fire service from Prop 172. And I think theirs is $80 million, not $100 million. So please fix this. This is the opportunity today to fix this. And yeah, thank you.
President Pudu.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with Supervisor Patty. I'd like to have this tabled if possible, and we can discuss it at a further time. I believe there's very lots to talk about here, and I have to leave it around noon if possible.
Okay, so I'll turn it back to Supervisor Miller. did you want to continue the motion, or do you want to table it for further investigation?
If there is a majority of the board that wishes to table this, I will table my motion, and I'm agreeable to that.
Okay. Vice Chair Rickman.
Thanks, Chair. And I don't agree to table this. I mean, we're halfway there. I mean, we have options here, and we're talking about options. I mean, as Chief Bradley just talked about, we're talking about future revenues. Option 3, govern future revenues, is something that will not impact or take away from any of the other agencies. And as you mentioned before, if we have to supplement through the general fund, maybe that can be discussed at a later time. But for me, I think future revenue that doesn't impact the Sheriff, Probation, District Attorney, Public Defender's Office, they're still made whole, and they're still getting an increase in growth. For example, it goes from 22-20, for example here, 22-23, Sheriff's Department 67.8 is still being 2023-2024 69.6. So we're giving our fire departments future growth of 10%. So I would say option 3.
Okay. Real quick. Sorry. Is this you? Okay. I'd have to put on my glasses, but hold on a second. Oh, Sherry. Okay. Yes, please state your name.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sherry Coburn. I'm the chairperson for the Ripon Fire District. And Chair Wynn, thank you so much. As a Ripon resident, I do want to echo what the fire chief said. As the chair, we have a very small budget to run to cover all of the services in the city of Ripon and within the county's area. It is incumbent upon the county to provide fire protection services, and because there isn't a fire protection board, but last year, fire district, Ripon does cover that. Last year, we had 2,000 calls. A quarter of those calls were concurrent, meaning that they happened at the same time. Cardiac arrests, drownings, vehicle accidents happen in the county. I get the reports when the fire district does go on them. While some of them are in the city, a lot of them do happen in the county. Caswell Park, we have drownings. We have fires at Caswell. $2.5 million over 18 years is a lot of money. The district has suffered because of it. We are at low staffing levels. We are pinching pennies to make ends meet. We have had to cut services because of that, and all at the cost of our constituents. I saw that some of the funding for this, for Prop 172 funds substance use disorders. That actually, Prop 63 money could be helping pay for the substance use disorders rather than taking it from the Prop 172. The MHSSA funding does mental health treatment and services. So I would really urge that the Prop 172 growth be returned to the fire districts. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll turn it back to the board. Supervisor Patty, Supervisor Laputa, Supervisor Miller, there's 3 of you. Is that your request, that we table this and bring it back with maybe some other options?
I think we should, because I think this is a larger issue, and I agree with what Chief Bitter said. 172 may not be the best way to figure this out, but there clearly is, there are multiple issues in terms of fire service, and we do need to figure it out. And so my issue with 172 is, if it's coming out of the general fund anyways, and I think you alluded to this, Chair, it may be better to come up with a different direct funding mechanism from the general fund, because then it eliminates all of the state requirements that govern Prop 172. So maybe it'll turn out you'll come back after you look at all these things and you'll say, no, we've decided, we've changed our recommendation, we think it should be. But I think this is a bigger issue, and I think it does deserve more careful study. So I would agree with my two colleagues that we should table this and we should dig a little deeper, and we should do it in partnership with our chiefs so that we have a really good understanding of what their losses have been and what would be the best path forward.
Just a quick question to County Council. Would this need a motion to table or would it just be direction to staff?
I would make it a motion.
Okay.
Then I will make the motion. I will withdraw my motion for option 4, and I will make a motion to table this and bring it back to the board when further research has been done.
I second.
Vice Chair Rickman, quick comment.
Thank you, Chair. You know, this is unfortunate because I guess I'll explain it in the next agendized item. That, I mean, this is important stuff, and we have to make our fire departments whole, and we can do it without affecting the other agencies. I mean, you got to love government, right? So instead of making the decisions, what do? Let's have a committee and go and create some more bureaucracy and study something that we can affect today. I just hope that if, you know, I disagree. I think we should continue to discuss this. I just hope that this board and this county recognizes the importance of our fire department. And it seems like on multiple occasions, and, you know, they're treated as almost second class. I mean, we saw it in COVID when I asked for our fire department. They were willing to help administrate vaccines, and there was a big argument or fight just to get that to happen. When our county at one time wouldn't let them respond to emergency incidents or medical emergencies when I was mayor of Tracy, and that was another fight that we've had to have. I recognize the importance of our fire department. I recognize the need of our residents to have services in our unincorporated areas, especially they're unprotected. So I just hope that this doesn't take long and it comes back before the board and, you know, we can make a decision. So that's my comment.
Okay. Supervisor Patty, you have a final comment?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Chairman. To Supervisor Rickman's point, I think we've given direction, which is what you were looking for primarily. What was presented was kind of a one-track possibility of consideration. To Supervisor Miller's point, the motion we made, to Chairman Wynn's point, we know that there are services, there are necessities, there are shortcomings, there's other counties that are doing something. So I believe we can bring something back in short order. I don't think this is a 90, 120-day anything. The board's giving you some feedback. We can bring back in consideration of the concerns of the fire department, and I agree with Supervisor Rickman. Public safety is paramount of our responsibilities, and I do not think they should be bypassed. I think we need to address, as the chiefs pointed out, the not only ongoing necessities, but the losses they've incurred based on prior decisions and the growth, expansion, and the necessity as our population demands have increased since 1992. So I believe we've given some good feedback, and I look forward to, within a short period of time, County Council's office and CAO's office working with our fire chiefs and bring back options, which may include one or two of the options that have been presented today. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. All right, Clerk of the Board, please vote. And it's adopted 4-1. Thank you for your input. All right, moving on to discussion item number 1. This is accept the recommendation Board of Supervisors ad hoc committee regarding alleged violation code of ethics by Supervisor Tom Petty and censure him for his misconduct. County Council.
It is recommended that the board accept the recommendation of the Board of Supervisors ad hoc committee. Determine whether the conduct of Supervisor Patty violated the code of ethics, and if so, determine whether censure is the appropriate remedy for this violation of the code of ethics. Reason for recommendation. In May of 2021, Supervisor Miller informed County Council of allegations that Supervisor Patty had violated the Board of Supervisors Code of Conduct. As required by the Code of Ethics, an ad hoc committee was formed to review the complaint and determine whether additional investigation was necessary. The ad hoc committee determined that additional investigation was necessary and retained Maureen Jacob, a partner with the law firm of Liebert Cassidy Whitmore, to conduct the investigation and make factual findings and conclusions about whether the conduct described in the confidential report occurred as alleged. Supervisor Patty was given the opportunity to be interviewed during the investigation. As required by the Code of Ethics, Supervisor Patty was given the opportunity to present written comments to the ad hoc committee. Supervisor Patty requested additional time to prepare his response, but ultimately elected not to provide any comments to the ad hoc committee. The confidential report has been provided to the Board of Supervisors under separate cover. The ad hoc committee, having considered the report, recommends that the Board of Supervisors censure Supervisor Patty, finding that his conduct as reflected in the report violates the Board of Supervisors Code of Ethics. Chair, I just want to remind the board members that as to the investigation report, this board has not taken any action to waive the attorney-client privilege or the attorney work product doctrine. I caution the board members against revealing the substance of the report to include the identity of witnesses and the content of their statements. Additionally, Ms. Jacob is present to give an opening statement if the board desires and to answer any questions that the board may have regarding her investigation findings within the confines of the attorney-client privilege.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Jacob.
Good morning.
Would you like to make an opening comment?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Maureen Jacob, as Ms. Johnson introduced me. I'm the managing partner in the San Francisco office at Liebert Cassidy Whitmore. I've been practicing in labor and employment law since I started as an attorney, which was 1999. I've been a partner with Liebert Cassidy Whitmore for over 10 years now. I specialize in litigation, workplace investigations, and do general advice and counsel. I've worked on behalf of the County of San Joaquin on and off for about 16 years now, working on a variety of matters for the county over the years. I was most recently retained to conduct an investigation in my capacity as counsel for the county, meaning conduct a confidential investigation. I was asked to appear today to answer questions. What I can answer questions about are if there are general questions about investigations, workplace investigations, protocols, best practices. I'm happy to entertain any of those questions. What I cannot do, and which would be a breach of my ethical duties to the County of San Joaquin, I cannot go into the specific investigation that I conducted on behalf of the county. So if questions are raised about my investigation, I will have to respectfully decline to answer specific questions about the investigation that I performed. Thank you.
Any questions? Just for information, the ad hoc committee was made up myself and Supervisor Villapudra when this was first originated, which then recommended an investigation by outside investigator. In regards to your investigation, I know this board has had conversations in regards to the length of the investigation, and I know we were in COVID. Could you kind of share some of the challenges that faced you in regards to trying to contact the involved parties?
I can speak generally to my experience of conducting workplace investigations during COVID and how that impacted my investigations work. Again, I will not be commenting specifically on the investigation that I performed most recently for San Joaquin County. So COVID has been, a strange time in many ways for every industry and individual, and it certainly impacted how we were practicing law and conducting workplace investigations. Prior to COVID, we were accustomed to coming in, scheduling interviews over, a consecutive number of days, having them in person, completing interviews. That wasn't possible during COVID. Most interviews were happening by video, so that's what my practice was during COVID. The availability of witnesses, in addition to the limitations around when and where we could do the interviews, was impacted, but the availability of witnesses also has an impact. If you have an investigation where all of your witnesses are employees of an agency, it's much easier to direct and order those employees to appear for interviews. But if you have an investigation, for example, that involves a lot of witnesses who are not employees of the employer, then you've got to go out, track down those witnesses on your own, and that can cause some delay as well. It is also not uncommon to have witnesses and parties involved in investigations have questions about whether or not they want to participate. And so you work through those types of issues as well, which can cause some delay. And then the last point about COVID, people were getting ill. And so because of illnesses, there could be delays in investigations as well. And then the final point I will make is that, when you have an investigation that involves multiple allegations, multiple witnesses, it is not uncommon for them to take some time. It's not a process that can be rushed, especially if you have very serious allegations against high-ranking employees, against elected officials, and the like. So the obligation that employers have in conducting investigations is to make sure that they are fair and thorough. And in that process of ensuring a thorough investigation, you want to run to ground your opportunities to meet with individuals who you think are important to the investigation. So those are my practices and what I typically follow in all cases.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm assuming that all the board members have read the investigation, so I think they're all very familiar with the details. It's kind of hard to talk about something when the rest of the world doesn't have any idea of what we actually reviewed. But nonetheless, I will open it up to the board. Any questions, any general questions about procedures or policy by board members to Ms. Jacob? Any comments from any of the board members in regards to the investigation itself?
Chairman, I have legal counsel here that would like to speak on this behalf. Thank you.
Okay. Please, and state your name, please.
Members of the board, county staff, and citizens. In this sort of a theater.
Could you move the microphone? Could you either move over? There you go.
In this sort of a theater, that is the theater of politics, most people come up with talking points, and I've done that. But I'm not going to talk about the merits of the statements made in this report, which I also have read. I'm not going to talk about censorship and the First Amendment, because those are getting kind of cliche these days. But I'm going to talk about one thing. I have one talking point: fairness. Okay? That also means constitutional due process. I respect the qualifications of opposing counsel as I've just heard them, but I also have to say I've done a little bit of research about due process in particular. The U.S. Supreme Court has said that under the Constitution, the laws must be specific, they cannot be overly general, and they cannot be vague. The Code of Ethics is just exactly that. They are not specific, they are overly general, and they are vague. Also, there's another Supreme Court case, and that states that the accused is entitled to the notice of the charges, a right to call witnesses, to be heard, and to confront adverse witnesses. That was not done here. The first case is Papa Cristo versus the City of Jacksonville. The second is Morrissey versus Brewer. I can get counsel the actual citations of those if she wants them. In any event, the California Supreme Court has also spoken on a matter that is much more on point here, Skelly versus State Personnel Board. And I'm sure counsel is familiar with that. An accused cannot be deprived of his due process right to pre-disciplinary discovery. That is, quote, the materials upon which the action is based, close quote. A hearing has to allow the accused to respond to the allegations prior to imposition of any actual disciplinary action. Due process, the prerequisites for that, under Skelly, the accused has to have received notice of the proposed discipline. The notice must allege these things: a specific violation of either a rule or a policy, and the factual basis for that violation. It must be served with all documents that were relied upon. And there must be a proposed deadline for response. It must include the effective date of the discipline. None of that's done here. I understand, as Chairman Wynn told me last time I appeared before you, that this is not a court of law, and that perhaps evidentiary rules should not apply. However, this is a governmental organization. You are a political subdivision of the state of California. Due process applies to any government organization. You've probably all seen the billboard about Mr. Patty's congressional race. This appears to be a politically coordinated attack on Mr. Patty, and a nonpartisan board should protect the integrity of your status of being nonpartisan. If you don't protect that status, this is going to appear as a railroad, a kangaroo court, and you will all be responsible for that appearance. Thank you for your valuable time, and that's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. I appreciate council's comments. Supervisor Miller.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that Jacobs could respond to some of the legal issues that were raised here.
Happy to do so. I appreciate council's comments, and I just want to clarify, he referred to me as opposing counsel. I'm actually counsel on behalf of the county, so I'm not in opposition to the county. I want to make sure everyone's clear about that. The key thing I would point out is there was a citation to the Skelly case. Skelly is, long-standing law in California. I just want to stress that that applies to public sector employees. And what Skelly requires is that notice is required to an employee prior to any serious disciplinary action being taken against an employee. And so that's distinguishable from what you have here before you. The other thing that I would like to comment on, yes, there are fundamentals of due process that the county should be taking into consideration. And as an attorney who specializes in representing government agencies throughout the state, due process is always at the forefront of our actions and how we approach things. And so when I'm serving in my capacity as an investigator for a public agency, what due process means is that I'm conducting an impartial, objective investigation that is fair to all parties involved, and that provides an opportunity. I can't force people who are not employed by the employer to participate, but I can't think of a single time throughout my career that I have not given the opportunity for the person making the complaint and the person or persons being accused in the complaint to respond to the allegations. So that is always done. That is my practice, and that satisfies due process. What you are not required to, if you are an accused, you are not required to get prior notice of the allegations against you. You get notice of the allegations against you during the interview process, but any such prior notification, unless a law calls for it, and there are, I can think of 2 examples, police officers and firefighters must be given prior written notice. That is the only case in the public sector where such notice is required. So due process for workplace investigations means fair, impartial, objective, and you give the opportunity for the person accused of some sort of policy violation or misconduct, give them the opportunity to respond to the allegations against them.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, may I respond?
Sure.
Okay. First of all, I take the position that Skelly is not distinguishable in any way. Tom is a public employee. He's an employee of this county. And what was presented by counsel as to no requirement of giving somebody notice of the accusation, I heard no citation to any case. Okay, the cases I cited are good law. And also, I would point out to you that nothing in the report, no statement, was taken under oath, under penalty of perjury. That's it.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? I would offer this. In my prior life, I dealt with Skelly for 6.5 years, so I know the details. I also dealt with the Peace Officer Bill of Rights in that same assignment. So I'm very familiar with discipline and the processes by which, in that particular case, police officers were protected. In this particular case, I would say that I want to thank Supervisor Villaputa. I know that it's a difficult job involved in these ad hoc committees. Vice Chair Rickman and I did the last one. But I know that he has tried as best he can to certainly accommodate the county and certainly Supervisor Patty in regards to getting the information available to the board to make a decision. I would also say that in the discussions and deliberations, whether with Vice Chair Rickman or certainly with Supervisor Villaputa, I think in both cases, I think we took the job very seriously in regards to looking at the evidence to make a determination as to our recommendation. It isn't something that any of us, all 5 of us up here, take lightly, because although it's not to the level, I would disagree as far as the legal standpoint, it's not to the level of actually a disciplinary action as an employee would normally face. It is administrative, and it does hold elected officials accountable for their behavior. And so that's one of the things that we've tried to maintain is the integrity of the board and the organization to ensure that when things come to our attention, that we deal with it and make recommendations as to how it should be handled. There's, as in disciplinary cases, there's no loss of pay, there's no termination, there's none of those things. but it is a record by which this board makes a decision as to what we believe is either appropriate or inappropriate conduct, and that's what the investigation revealed. So, having said that, I have...
Chairman Nguyen.
Yes.
I have public comments for this item.
Okay. Supervisor Patty first.
I'll go after public comments.
All right. Clerk of the board.
The first public comment was submitted by Sonia Spatoli, who writes, I would like to thank Supervisor Tom Patty for his 40 accomplishments. He has my full support, and I believe his constitutional rights have been denied. Sonia Spatoli. The next comment was submitted by Bella, who writes, this discussion is absolutely shameful. BOS that are involved behind this should be ashamed. Such a waste of time and just in time for the November 8th election. This is nothing but a smear campaign against Tom Patty, and a lot of voters know this. Anything to go after him right now. Enough is enough. The good news is there are two termed out individuals that are behind this. The main one that is always after Tom Patty, Kathy Miller, loves being a mental midget. This is her life goal. The next comment was submitted by Elisa Mendoza, who writes, the discussion about Tom is getting old and should be resolved quickly. Using the Board of Supervisors meeting and taxpayers' money to campaign against Tom should be a criminal. I'm tired of Catherine Miller and Chuck Wynn trying hard to tarnish Tom's efforts. Your constituents see you coming from a mile away. You two should be ashamed. We have so many problems going on in our county, and this is what's being addressed. The people of Stockton are afraid right now because there is a killer on the loose, and this discussion is what's on the agenda. I can't wait for the changing of the guard, especially with you two who are on their way out. Let's clean up San Joaquin County. Let's end the state of emergency. Put that energy into something that counts and we can be proud of. Sincerely, someone who is tired of your poop show. And that concludes our public comments.
Anybody in the audience? Speak? Seeing none. Supervisor Patty.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I respect the board's decision, wherever that's going to go. Ms. Jacobs, I was uninformed of when you were going to sunset and close off the discussion or the interview. I know that we had engaged. I know you attempted to meet with my chief of staff, and there on 3 occasions there was some technical issues, and he was never contacted for a 4th occasion, according to our records. I had asked you, just not knowing the nature of the charges that I was going to be defending, I had asked you, which I believe is my constitutional right, to know what I'm being accused of, and you had denied that. So I'm really struggling with the hearsay. I have read many of the reports, many of the things that were said, and I 100% wholeheartedly disagree with the hearsay. I find it completely unfounded. I find exaggerations. I find it also appalling that my political opponents' paid staff have engaged with some of the allegations that in one instance you found unsustained. So I appreciate that. But in the other instances, there's hearsay of things that I had done or my misconduct or things I had hinted to. And even when asked, did he say this, did he do that, the answers were no. But I feel like that's maybe what he meant. So I find this very subjective and an assumption of guilt for them to be sustained. I respect the process. I really, truly would have loved to be interviewed once I received the report, not knowing that it was closed out. I asked County Council if I'd gladly engage in the conversation, and for the record, I was absolutely preoccupied with an election cycle, and that was a top priority. I didn't know that there was a drop-dead date that you were closing out, which would be fair to understand this isn't going to go on in perpetuity, but I would have appreciated had you reached out and said, I'm going to close this investigation out. I'm giving you one last chance. Would you like to interview before Friday of whatever date? I'm just assuming that I was hopeful that would have happened. When I asked County Council if I can engage with you and answer anything, because I have nothing to hide. There's things that I may have done that may have rubbed people certain ways, or they don't like it, I'm abrasive, and for that I do apologize. But there's nothing that rises to that caliber of a ethic violation, and I do believe our ethic code is weaponized. I do believe that it's open and frivolous, and it can be interpreted for many means of what someone would consider is a violation of an ethics code. And we've addressed this in the past, and I believe that the next board perhaps may want to address that, and that's to be down the road, because here we are, proof in point. So when I asked if I could be interviewed, County Council said no. Now, I don't know if that was breaking a constitutional law in the state of California, if that was breaking a federal law or a county law, but I really, truly, to this day, I'm baffled by the idea of why I couldn't have a conversation with you, address any of the issues and allegations, because I can assure you, my opinion and my facts are dramatically different than a lot of the hearsay that's interjected in your report, which is fairly enough what you have to go on. I 100% understand that's all you have to go on, and I respect that. But I really don't know why I was denied the opportunity to speak with you, because I think it would have been appropriate for you to make an amendment to the findings and either further validate your findings or perhaps change your opinion on 1, 2, or all 4 of the sustained. So I really regret that we didn't have that opportunity and I wasn't informed of a sunset. But again, I have to accept responsibility because of my schedule and not knowing that there was a sunset date on the horizon. So I apologize for that. I respect the work you've done. I don't agree with it, but I also respect the board's decision going forward. So thank you.
May I respond?
Sure, go ahead.
I can respond somewhat. Supervisor Patty, I respect your comments and appreciate them. I can speak generally to some of the points that you raised. Again, I cannot go into the specifics related to this investigation because the attorney-client privilege prevents me from doing that. And my duty is to the County of San Joaquin, so it would be unethical for me to speak to any of the specific points you raised about this investigation. What I can tell you generally, though, in my 20-plus years of doing this work, and this is what I do day in and day out, it is a best practice, an industry standard to not in a civil administrative investigation. Rules are different if you're talking about the criminal investigation world, for example, but in civil administrative investigations, you are not supposed to provide somebody who's been accused of the misconduct that you're investigating with advance notice of the allegations that they are going to be questioned about. So that is how I conduct my investigations. Unless the law requires me to provide advance notice in the examples of police officers and firefighters, whom I investigate as well and routinely do, so I'm very familiar with that process. Unless an exception applies, prior notice is not given. To the point about whether or not certain witnesses were interviewed, investigations take on a life of their own and they change, and the needs and certain considerations will dictate whether or not you're going to interview certain people. You most certainly will interview or try to interview the complainant and the accused. But aside from that, any other witness who's identified, for a variety of reasons, you may decide you will no longer be interviewing. And as the investigator, I certainly don't share information with witnesses about why that's the case, that I made a determination to not interview somebody. So that's part of my job as the investigator, is to use my discretion and judgment around those types of questions. With respect to the question about hearsay, so there's direct evidence and there's hearsay. If there are statements collected from witnesses about their personal knowledge, I saw the car run through the red light, right? I was the eyewitness. Then you get that, that's direct knowledge. If somebody says, I heard so-and-so say X, Y, and Z, that's a hearsay statement. You are, Supervisor Patty, 100% correct. In a court of law, hearsay is inadmissible. But a workplace investigation is not a court of law. And it is accepted that hearsay can be considered. Now, it will carry a different weight than a witness who's making statements from their personal knowledge, but it is not excluded because it is hearsay. It's given a different level of weight, but it can be considered. So I just wanted to put that out there as well. And then The last point I want to raise is to Supervisor Patty's point about being denied the opportunity to speak with me. So it is my practice in all of my investigations to attempt to contact individuals who are accused of misconduct that I need to interview. And it is also my practice to give more than one opportunity to participate in an interview. And, you know, that's what I always do. And I just want to stress that as my final point. And I do respect and appreciate your comments, Supervisor Patty, and I'll leave it there.
So, Chairman, through the chair, one of the allegations brought against me was bribery.
I can't go into any of the specifics.
I'm not asking that, but that was an allegation. It's on a billboard that I'm being investigated for bribery, and we know that that's not sustained. But that's a pretty serious allegation. That's more than just a I don't like the way he's behaved, or there's a little bit of abrasiveness about him, and I don't like something. So when I'm asking and inquiring what I'm being accused of, bribery is a pretty serious allegation to bring against me. And I believe bribery probably has a criminal element to it. So for me to be denied even that fact of knowledge almost seems entrapment. Almost seems like you want to walk me into something that I'm asking. I don't have no idea what I'm being accused of. So do I need counsel? I need to review this. And when bribery is one of the charges, one of the worst things I think an elected official could do, I've already publicly and wrongfully, and of course now it's being used in a campaign, I've been accused of proposing a slush fund, which is illicit use for political bribery of public funds, which was never, and it's not part of this investigation, but that was never proposed by when I looked for our Board of Supervisors to have discretionary funds as Stanislaus and Sacramento in the millions of dollars each supervisor has. And it was only going to be utilized by a 3-2 vote, a majority vote. So any use of those monies would have to come to the board for approval. But I was accused by a supervisor of proposing a slush fund. Now that's damaging to my name and my reputation. Bribery and corruption as a businessman with 20 plus years, and my father 30 years before me, there's not one person, and there's thousands of people I've worked with in 20 years of business ownership. There's not one person that say Tom Patty did them wrong in business. In fact, I could line up this room with hundreds of people who say, the guy did better than we ever paid for, the guy did great service, the guy took care of us, the guy did work for free. When I lost money on a job, the guy took care of me, again and again and again. So to have a billboard up, Tom Patty investigated for bribery, and for anybody to infer that that's a minor thing, that we're just going to interview you about some things that are being said, I'm a little bit more concerned about accusation of bribery, which again was not sustained, but factually it was launched by my political opponent's paid staff and brought to you through this board. That's very concerning to me, and I don't take that allegation lightly. And I appreciate you looked at it. Again, I respect your findings. I personally would have loved to have participated. Had I known there was a sunset, I truly, absolutely would. And it's my fault. 100%, I didn't anticipate a closure without maybe a last chance to speak. County Council did say, we want you to speak with them. I'll be, yep, I will. And it was not top of my priority. I apologize for that. And equally, as I said, for people that find me abrasive when I was chairman or something I did, I apologize for that as well. But I believe there's nothing I've done, and I've read that report thoroughly, that rises to the level of censorship and anything that's I would consider a violation. So thankfully, and not looking to argue back and forth, I respect the position and your reply, and that's my statement. That's all, Chairman.
I got a question of County Council. We've talked extensively in regards to what information we can bring out in this meeting. My question with Supervisor Patty's comments, it seems like he's kind of broached that confidentiality in regards to relating one of the allegations against him. Am I correct in that assumption?
I would say that Supervisor Patty's comment revealed some information that is contained in the investigative report.
So, in essence, that's a breach of the confidentiality that we're all trying very hard to abide by.
Yes.
So the next question is, if he opens that door, can other members, since we've all read the report, can we respond to not only his comment, but other comments or maybe parts of the investigation which relate to other parts of the investigation?
Chairman, this board has not waived the attorney-client privilege. Supervisor Patty's inadvertent statement does not waive the privilege. It belongs to the entire board. I would say that the attorney-client privilege is sacrosanct. We have it for a reason. It's the foundation of an attorney's relationship with their client. It allows the client to be frank and candid with their attorney, and it allows the attorney to be frank and candid with their client. And so even though Supervisor Patty revealed some of the allegations of the complaint, I'd still urge this board not to waive the attorney-client privilege.
Okay, I get it.
Chairman, if I can reply.
Just a minute, Supervisor Patty.
Sure.
So, unfortunately, what's happened or what's happening is Supervisor Patty can make all kinds of statements to defend himself, and yet the facts as we know them in the investigation are not available for the public to hear. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Supervisor Miller.
Chairman, I just asked please to speak.
Thank you.
After Supervisor Miller.
What I was going to bring up is exactly this issue. Supervisor Patty is the only one who said the word bribery. He said it at a public meeting several weeks ago, and he's bringing it up again today. He's also referencing particulars about that could breach the confidentiality of one of the individuals, one of the witnesses. And we've been cautioned against this. He's selectively revealing information from the report, and he's doing it inaccurately and piecemeal. He's not releasing all of it. He's releasing little parts of it, and sometimes he's making inaccurate statements. He also spoke to a San Francisco Chronicle reporter and breached the confidentiality of a witness. I believe, and all due respect to your recommendation, but this board, if Supervisor Patty is going to continue to use the report selectively and inaccurately, I think that perhaps the board should take up the issue of whether or not to waive attorney-client privilege, because it's really not fair for the public to not have all the information. And second of all, I want to remind this board that when this all happened initially, congressional districts, none of the new districts had been redrawn. We hadn't even gone into that process yet. Nobody had announced for any of the congressional races. There was absolutely no reason to believe that the two individuals in Supervisor Patty's race right now would be in that race. And so I could provide more information about the witness, but I'm not going to, because I do respect the attorney-client privilege. And when the Chronicle reporter spoke to me, I was very adamant. I can't talk to you about anything that happened in the report. I can tell you what I put in my complaint, but I cannot tell you. It didn't include any names, so I cannot give that to you. And the reporter said to me, well, you might be interested to know I spoke to Supervisor Patty last week, and he said this about a particular witness. So I do think the board needs to consider this as we go forward. I would not waive privilege. but I think we need to make sure that that these kind of statements stop.
Supervisor Patty.
Thank you, Chairman. Maybe nobody's aware of this, but there's a billboard on the highway where several 100,000 people are looking at this alleged bribery. So that's going to be my first reference. And I am referencing something that's not sustained. I'm not referencing anything, not defending against anything that is.
Again, point of order, that's information specific to the report, and Supervisor Patty does not have the ability to waive that right. It belongs to the full board. And so to put out to the public findings from the report, that is breaching the confidentiality.
Chairman, if you will, before I was interrupted by Supervisor Miller, there's a mechanism and a process called ethic violation. So if Supervisor Miller can feel free to file another ethic complaint. She seems to have a habit of doing this, and I have no problem defending that when it comes along. Thank you.
Vice Chair Rickman.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a quick question, and without revealing anything, and it's tough. But this whole billboard, and again, I'm bringing it out because it's out here, and the attorney brought it up. If there is a billboard, I haven't seen it. How did that information get out? If this is supposed to be confidential, how did that information get up to his opponent? How did that happen? I mean, how did that information leak? Somebody leaked it. If this is a confidential report, it is. So how did that information get out? That's my question.
Chair?
Yeah, Supervisor Miller.
Supervisor Patty said it in a public meeting here, our meeting in September, when he brought up his item to abolish the Code of Ethics. He brought it up, and the statement was made by him. Nobody else had made that statement. He made it publicly. That's when it came forward. It wasn't leaked. At least not that I know of. I haven't seen the billboard either. But he made that statement publicly.
Well, I guess it depends. Oh, I'm sorry, Chair. Can I have the floor real quick?
Sure.
I guess it depends, when that billboard was up, when that information came out or who had access to that information.
I don't think it serves any purpose to make accusations that you can't prove. As Supervisor Miller said, maybe it's with I'm sure I know our meetings are watched by a number of individuals. I would suspect that probably his opponent's staff may watch it also. So again, these are things that we do. And what troubles me is, again, he not only addresses one of the allegations in the complaint, but he also makes comment as to the finding of that complaint. So it seems to me a little bit unfair that on the one hand, he brings up only one of the allegations as opposed to the other allegations that were included. And I guess my question is, why is that?
And
never mind. So, Vice Chair Rickman, do you have a comment?
Can you believe that we ended up our public safety talk, which is a very important talk that deals with our county business, to this? It's unfortunate, and I've said it last time. It is very unfortunate that we have board members that don't get along. And it puts, the rest of the board and staff in an uncomfortable position. And again, this isn't the first time. We just dealt with an ethics complaint on what it is, and there's been some in the past before I got here, and like I've said before, not to sugarcoat it, they don't like each other. I think anybody who watches these meetings sees that. It's always a tit for tat kind of thing that goes on this board, and we should be doing county business stuff that what we're up here to do is, like today when we're talking about fire safety, we have all our fire chiefs here, and we cut it short to deal with 2 board members who don't get along, and it's not fair. Like I said, it's not fair to the public. We have business to attend to, and very important business that we need to get done here. But in case, well, that's, I guess, a moot point, because here we are. If you look at the Code of Ethics, and I'm going to read a portion of the Code of Ethics, and under Article 3, dedicated service, an excerpt of it, the county expects all county officials to use good manners, to be considerate, respectful, and civil, to be accurate in statement, and to exercise sound professional or sound judgment in the performance of their work. And, to accuse, one individual of, I'm not saying if that was, but it's, we said it in the past, of one individual board member saying something that the other doesn't agree with, and the other then files an ethics complaint. And, I went back to look at some of the videos of the last 2 years since I've been on this board, and seeing who has violated that Code of Ethics. And I can tell you, there has been several board members who have violated that section, because it is subjective. So where does this all end? Are we continuing? Are we going to just continue to do the tit for tat thing and file ethics complaints on, other board members, or we are actually going to do what we're elected to do and work for the residents who put us in these chairs? That's my statement.
Supervisor Miller.
Thank you. I'm going to counter this tit for tat narrative, because it's been brought up before. I have been here almost 8 years. This is the first and only ethics complaint I have brought forward. On the other hand, Supervisor Patty has brought forward 3 separate ethics charges against me, most of them specifically because, exactly as you said, he brought one up again today. He didn't like the phrasing I used about something, but it was said publicly, and he had every opportunity to counter it. He consistently brings up things that were investigated and found not to be a violation of the Code of Ethics, that the words or phrases used were within the general usage and were found in at least a half dozen different dictionaries. So this narrative that anytime Supervisor Patty says something that I don't agree with, I file an ethics charge against him, is completely false. The last meeting, I did not file that complaint. That was brought by an employee, and it was a result of a EEO Rule 20 complaint. I had nothing to do with filing that. So I do take exception to this, and this phraseology that Supervisor Elliott brought up, that the code could be weaponized. The only person I see weaponizing it or attempting to weaponize it is Supervisor Patty. This, to say that this is unimportant and petty is to disrespect the citizens of San Joaquin County who brought forward 2 of the charges to me and risked getting sideways with Supervisor Patty. And nothing was brought forward by me until those charges had been corroborated by a minimum of 2 or 3 other individuals. So to say that this was ginned up for political reasons is simply a false narrative. And if a resident of San Joaquin County comes to me and says, I am being mistreated by a member of your board, and I believe it's inappropriate and even perhaps illegal, and I do some investigation and find out maybe I have an ethical responsibility pursuant to the FPPC in this state to request that the issue be investigated by the proper authorities. That is exactly what I did. When I got enough evidence, corroboration, that I felt there perhaps was some substance, I invoked the ethics process. I took it straight to county counsel's office. From that point on, other than being investigated, being interviewed, I had nothing to do with it. I didn't speak to anybody. I had nothing. I did a complete hands-off. So to be mischaracterized repeatedly as this being some kind of petty back and forth with a colleague, I don't have to love everybody up here to work effectively. I have served on agencies throughout this county for the better part of 20 years, and I have never had a problem being a productive member of a board. And frankly, I don't feel that the overall work of this board has been significantly impacted by this. I think it's unfortunate. And yes, at times it is embarrassing, but to characterize this as a one-on-one back and forth, if you read that whole report, then you should understand that the majority of individuals do not perceive it that way.
Point of order, or point of information.
Just a second. Supervisor Laputa.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Jacob, I want to thank you for this detailed report. You did an excellent job. And furthermore, I don't, kind of like what Mr. Rickman said here, I don't see no benefit to the county and the time we're spending on this to keep discussing it. It's no secret that these two don't get along, and they never will, and we can go on forever. And I just think that we have better things to do. So, how do we go forward? Censoring Mr. Patty is not going to. I don't think there's any benefit in censoring him. I see that there's too many arguments on both sides. I know Supervisor Miller is very upset about the way she alleges that Mr. Patty treated her, and Mr. Patty has an argument that it's the same way, and we can go back and forth. And for us to be the judge is very difficult. But I think that we should just maybe accept the report and move on. No censorship is what I think is the best thing to do to go forward.
Vice Chair Rickman.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, for one, I didn't name names, and there's been other ethics complaints been brought on by other supervisors. So just to clarify, Supervisor Miller's 5-minute speech.
I would just add, I've had 2 complaints filed against me. One by Supervisor Patty, one by Supervisor.
First of all, I'm not asking. I really don't care.
I understand that. What I'm saying is, you're presenting the idea that somehow these complaints are just a myriad of them, and they're not. So let me just touch upon Vice Chair Rickman in regards to one of your comments, and we'll close it, and then we'll decide what the board wants to do, if anything. Vice Chair Rickman, you indicate that this is an ongoing conflict between Supervisor Miller and Supervisor Patty, and that that causes all the dissension and consternation on this board. At the last meeting, when we had a discussion about one of the complaints, and Supervisor Patty left the room, but I made a comment, and I meant it, is that when Supervisor Patty left the room, you and Supervisor Miller disagreed on a particular issue. There wasn't any yelling, there wasn't any screaming, it was very cordial, civil, etc., and the board made a decision, and that's fine. when I choose as chair, and we all do, when I choose as chair the assignments for the various supervisors, I don't just do it because I like somebody or I think, that they're my friend. I do it because it's important for the board to place supervisors in committees, boards, commissions, where they're most effective. And by doing that, what I do is I contact those who are involved in those particular agencies, and I ask them the question. I said, who would you like on the Board of Supervisors? Who do you think would work well with your body, etc.? And I would just offer this. Supervisor Patty was and I'll put it delicately, because they were very diplomatic, but Supervisor Patty was not a choice on any of those. And my point is that Vice Chair Rickman, you indicate that somehow, Supervisor Miller and her comments, and then Supervisor Patty and his comments are causing. But I would tell you this, that unfortunately, Supervisor Patty has a reputation, and not to get into the investigation, but the fact is that the behavior that he talks about in regards to his defense is in a totally different universe than what I'm aware of. And that's not to talk about specifics. But the point is that we have a problem. I've said it before, this board, because of the conflict amongst the members. We sometimes are dysfunctional, and people watch us because it's entertaining. And that's sad to me, because I believe in the organization and the integrity of the Board of Supervisors. So having said that, I would ask the board for a motion or whatever, if you just want to accept the report, or if you want to censure, that's up to you. But the ad hoc committee did recommend censure, but again, this is up to the 5-member board to make a decision at this time.
Yeah, since Supervisor Villaputo sitting on, he was part of the ad hoc committee on this allegations. So I'll second his, I'll take that as a form of a motion, okay, and I'll second that.
Okay. Motion second, please vote.
Point of clarity, what exactly was the motion?
As I understand it, the motion was to accept the report and no further action against Supervisor Patty.
So by accepting the report, I'm not sure if we need a modified clarification, because I'm a little bit confused on the report. By accepting the report, we are accepting censure, or by accepting the report, it's just the report's received and no further action? County Council, perhaps through the board, through the chair?
Through the chair, I would say it's the latter. We're accepting the report and the recommendation from what the board would be adopting. If they adopted Supervisor Villaputo's motion, is that there will be no censure.
Thank you.
And it's adopted 3-2. Thank you all. All right, moving on. Thank you, Miguel. Thank you for your time. All right. Moving to the okay, just make sure I covered all. Appointments, boards, and commissions, Vice Chair Rickman.
Thank you, Chair. Item 4.1, approve the appointment position of various boards and commission. And I'll make this, or these statements are a form of a motion. Kennedy Community Center Advisory Board, category low income representative, 1 position, position number 4003.1. Recommend for appointment Alyssa Leva. San Joaquin County Mosquito and Vector Control District, category Board of Supervisor appointment, 1 position, position number 5901.1. Recommend for appointment Craig Watanabe. Workforce Development Board, category at-large business representative, one position, position number 7208.10. Recommend for appointment Robin Sanborn, category community-based organization, education and training for clients with barriers representative, one position, position number 7216. Recommend for appointment Jose Dominguez. And Chair, that, like I said, is a form of a motion.
Okay, we have a motion second. Motion second, please vote. And it's adopted 4-0. Thank you. All right, moving on to COVID-19 discussion.
It's still morning. Good morning, Chairman Nguyen and members of the board.
Morning.
At this time, well, before we begin, I need to read into the record some corrections to the original board letter. So under reasons for a recommendation, the allocations that we recommended have changed. Committed is $14,680,453. Illegal dumping stayed the same. Non-county organizations is $2,039,632. Healthcare centers stays at $3 million. Veteran service organizations stayed at $4 million. Fire agencies at $5,260,696. County departments changed to $7,148,000. Housing projects at $20 million, and reserves at $15,890,376, for a total of $74,019,157. Again, I'm Sarah Stickler, Deputy County Administrator, and with me is our Assistant County Administrator, Sandy Regala. At this time, I will provide the board recommendations for the second tranche of the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds, also referred to as ARPA. First, we'll go over the eligible uses of ARPA. The American Rescue Plan provides 4 major categories of eligible uses to tackle the broad range of public health and economic challenges caused or exacerbated by the COVID-19 emergency. Number 1, revenue replacement for the provisions of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue due to COVID-19 public health emergency relative to revenues collected in the most recent fiscal year prior to the emergency. COVID-19 expenditures or negative economic impacts of COVID-19, including assistance to small businesses, households, and hard-hit industries, and economic recovery. Premium pay for essential workers, and investments in water, sewage, and broadband infrastructure. So first, we'll go over how we allocated the first tranche. As a county, we received 2 allocations totaling $148 million. The first tranche, equal to the second, was $74,019,057. As you can see up on the first slide, the first column is the use of funds, the amount, and the day that it came to the board for your approval. We have veterans, family COVID assistance grants, small business grants, round 4, first 5, home key, the RAD card program, COVID-19 testing, vaccination, we made an allocation to the Lodi House, Parks and Recs water projects, various ISD projects, and the $1,000 bonus to employees for COVID, in addition to public works items. Also, you'll see at the bottom that the fund earned interest of $87,290,000. for a total of $47,262 and $262,303. The county did extensive research to come up with our recommendations for how we would like to allocate the funds. Last year, in October of 2001, we referenced Beacon Economics. In January, Godby Research. San Joaquin County administrative staff met with all of the board members individually. We had meetings with the Chambers of Commerce, business districts, the Children Alliance. Analysts reached out to their various county departments, and we also met with county agencies. Here is a list of how the county administrators recommends the second tranche allocation received May of 2022. We have previously committed $14,680,453, which is 20% of the second tranche of the funding. Illegal dumping for $2 million, which is 3% of the funding. Non-county organizations for $2,039,632, which is 3% of the funding. Health centers for $3 million at 4%. Veteran service organizations for $4 million at 5%. Fire agencies for $5,260,696 at 7%. County departments for $7,148,000 at 10%. Housing projects for $20 million at 27%. And a reserves of $15,890,376 at 21%. For our total allocation of $74,019,157. Now I'm going to go over each use or each recommendation within the group. So first we'll go over committed. So these are items that have already come to your board for approval. We allocated $500,000 to the Youth Workforce Initiative, $495,000 to the Community Grant Fund, $130,000 to the Neglected Children Fund, $2 million to 211, $6,355,453 to the Community Center repairs, and $5,200,000 to the Mental Health Workforce Project pipeline projects, for a total of $14,680,453. County Administrator's Office is recommending a commitment of $2 million in ARPA funds to support a legal dumping ordinance through the development and implementation of the county's education, enforcement, and eradication plan. That will be through fiscal year 2026. We're recommending $2,039,632 in ARPA funds for non-county organizations. Downtown Alliance for $1,691,632. The City of Tracy and the Downtown Stockton Alliance will go over. They had lots of requests, and the next two slides will go over all of their requests and what we accepted and what we did not accept. The City of Tracy for a 10-year property-based improvement district extension for $68,000. Stockton Food Bank for additional funding for $250,000, and the Miracle Mile Improvement District for 1/3 of their cost for their renewal price. So the city of Stockton has already committed 1/3 of $30,000. Are recommending funding for an additional $30,000, and the district would come up with the remaining. Downtown Stockton Alliance, again, we are recommending $1,691,632 in funding through, I think it's about 13 projects. So the DSA assessment for 22-23 of $1,167,132. Parking passes for $10,000. their DSA recertification fee for $55,000, a maintenance vehicle for the district for vehicles for $128,000, 500 RTD round trip passes for $1,500, 100 downtown Stockton business spots and local entrepreneur program for $60,000, window repair fund for $50,000, banners for $100,000, window wraps or displays for vacant windows in downtown Stockton for $50,000, 8 to 10 solar phone charging kiosk stations for $30,000, and 2 EV charging stations for $20,000, and finally, trash enclosure near the Canlis building for $20,000. Now we will go over what we are not recommending funding for. We note that a large portion of this, $20 million, was for a music festival downtown, and we are not recommending funding for that. There was just no way that we could justify that with the parameters of ARPA funding. But I'll go over all of them together. Also, a lot of them we did not recommend because we'd like to stay away from any type of revenue replacement or providing jobs that will then go away after the 2 years. So we are not recommending for the permitting department to cover upcoming downtown permit events for $200,000. As I mentioned, $20 million for the music festival downtown, a partnership with Uber for $100,000, a management consultant for $100,000, a business consultant for 2 years for $40,000, a part-time management consultant for $100,000, job listing promotions for $30,000, food truck permitting for $50,000, marketing for downtown Stockton spaces for lease for $50,000, gift cards to restaurants paired with sports tickets for $15,000, statement making murals of sports teams for $100,000, an art installation for $1 million, and downtown Stockton one-night hotel vouchers for $5,000. San Joaquin County Health Centers had a requested $6,136,688 to cover the cost of 13 staff through December 2026. County administrative staff is recommending $3 million. We are recommending a commitment of $4 million in ARPA funds for facility repairs, upgrades, and equipment purchases at eligible veteran services organizations located in the county through 2026. Below is just a list of all of the veteran service organizations in the county. And the County Administrator's Office will work with Facilities Management and Veteran Services to develop a reimbursement program and to assist veteran service organization with facility repairs and maintenance. For all one time. The County Administrator's Office received 4 main and then 1 from ISD from fire agencies. They're recommending a commitment of $5,260,696 in ARPA funds for fire projects for years 2022 through 23 through 25-26. Ripon Consolidated Fire had an ask, or we are recommending funding for Ripon Consolidated Fire for a station dispatch center, ambulance, and supplies for $1,230,000. Montezuma Fire for a 2023 F-150 Chase Command vehicle for $82,060. South San Joaquin Fire Authority for a watercraft, equipment, PPE, and training for $208,000. South San Joaquin County Fire Authority for Phase 2 of a training center for $2,599,234. And then we'll fund our, and this is in the fire districts because it is for the fire districts, even though we're actually giving the funding to our ISD division. To replacement for 13 different fire districts for their radio replacements, and that's for $1,141,446.
And Sarah, if I could just interrupt you for 1 second. I just wanted to point out to the board in relation to the earlier Prop 172 comment, we have been actively working with our fire districts to try to provide them where we can additional economic assistance. And this is surrounding a lot of one-time asks that the districts have come to us for. So what you requested earlier today will be a continuation of that. But I did want to point out that we have been having a dialogue with those districts. Thank you. Go ahead, Sarah.
We were able to accommodate all of the fire agencies' requests, other than you'll see a note at the bottom that Ripon Fire had an additional ask of $267,000, and it was for overtime for prior year, and we are not recommending funding for that. We're recommending a commitment of $7,148,000 for our county departments, Public Works for a SCADA for $500,000, the Registrar of Voters for a voting replacement system of $3.6 million, the Office of Emergency Services for a shower trailer, training, technology updates, and a vehicle for $598,000, and First Five to continue programs through June 24 of $2,450,000.
Okay. Sorry, through the chair, if I could just add on the Public Works item, that $500,000 is in addition to the $2.1 million that your board approved a few months ago, and this is for the same project, but they have seen costs escalate. So.
And we are recommending a $20 million commitment for affordable housing development and permanent supportive housing locating in San Joaquin County. According to Godby Research, 61.8% of surveyed residents said that addressing homelessness was extremely important. The county administrator staff worked collaboratively with the program administrator for the homeless initiative to find an equitable value to commit. We did reach out through our program administrator for homelessness and our office, and we received approximately $40 million in possible projects, all at various stages of viability. So we haven't picked any one project yet, but we do plan, we would like them to bring their own board items back for consideration. If you notice, the housing projects is the 27% of this tranche, and housing projects address the main concern and are extremely expensive of the funding by building strong resilience and equitable recovery through investments that support long-term growth and opportunity. And last but not least, we are recommending a reserve of $15,896,000 that are not committed or committed to reserves, and we do not have any identified projects. It's very early on. We have until December 31st of 2024 to commit the funds and expend the funds by December 31st of 2026. Chairman Nguyen and members of the board, this concludes my presentation on the overview of the recommendations for the second tranche of the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds. We're available for any questions.
Supervisor Patty.
Thank you. Through the chair. The $20 million for housing, do we have a breakdown on where and to what projects, or is that coming back to us to allocate when we're just setting it aside?
Correct. We're just setting it aside at this point. We got a lot of projects. We were having prioritizing the projects. We asked for high-level information from the agencies that we typically deal with, and we didn't feel comfortable recommending any funding at this time without more information, a more vetted process from the agency. So we plan to bring back in the very near future specific projects for the board's review.
And when, since we're coming up on a winter season, when would we be having some proposals to consider?
So just to answer the question briefly, the short answer is as soon as possible. As Ms. Zickler mentioned, these projects are in various stages of viability. Presumably we'll be going through a very similar process to what we asked the city projects last year to go through, working through the General Services Director to provide proposals, budgets, et cetera, something that can be vetted by our General Services Department and ultimately be approved for funding. I think presumably that process would start with board approval, obviously, and then move on from there. So, at the direction of the county administrator or, my manager, Greg Diederich, I can certainly work with any of these organizations to try to develop something similar to what we've done in the past with these organizations and others.
When was that going to be?
The question, it's difficult to answer with anything definitive because we are talking about several different projects. I think that without getting in too deep into the details now, because again, as Ms. Zickler mentioned, the information that we received was very high level. I think some of them could be funded very quickly and could be implemented very quickly. Again, I would need a higher level of confidence to give you a really strong answer on that. I think some of the projects are going to take potentially several years to be implemented. I mean, in terms of the funds being implemented into those projects. So it's going to range. But yeah, again, I think there's at least one or two projects that we could talk about at a future date that we'll be able to bring back to this board, certainly before the end of the year.
So just to delve into this a little bit, is anything, some projects people have talked to you about? So there's possibly, I know we have Gospel Rescue Center, they've got an ask, they've identified their buildings, they've got plans for construction, which that might be in an advanced stage of readiness compared to others. But particularly, where's the focus? Women and children's shelter, housing, again, the Gospel Rescue Center with the navigation center component. We've got veterans, and there's a possible, I know that there's talk in this additional land over by the Victory Gardens. So are these it's all the above, or do we have already identified some of the projects, some in a more advanced stage of readiness?
Sure. So it really it's the latter. In terms of the kind of the priorities that you'd asked about, certainly we take our guidance from the SLFRF final rule, and which Ms. Zickler kind of highlighted quite a bit just a bit ago. Housing is quite clearly a major priority in the final rule. Shelter projects are acceptable, but there are what seems to be greater limitations on those. The most notable is that you cannot do new construction of a shelter project with SLFRF or ARPA funds. It seems like there are lots of other options there, and I've certainly worked with the two shelter projects that the board has supported in the past, in the city of Lodi and the city of Tracy, to try to sort of coalesce some ideas around what can and can't be done with these funds. Where affordable housing is concerned, it seems clear that there are, I think it's fair to say, slim to zero limitations on what you can do with the funds: new construction, acquisition, rehab, funding a capitalized operating reserve. I could go on. So, again, I think the priority is going to be based upon, research public, statements from this board, and also the SLR final rule that affordable housing is the direction to go.
Affordable housing? With
these funds, yeah.
But you can't do new construction, so acquire properties that could be.
You can do new construction on affordable housing. The only restriction on new construction would be for shelter projects.
Okay. That's all. Thanks.
Supervisor Miller.
Thank you. I have a question. I'm going back to the Downtown Stockton Alliance. On the first slide of what was approved, the largest one was like $1.1 million for assessments. Can you explain exactly what that is? For 22-23.
So it was the Downtown Stockton Alliance assessments for the 22-23.
I just wonder if you have more information, because you said that one of the criteria was it wasn't for revenue replacement. So that's what I'm wondering. Is this, they're going to give an assessment holiday to the property owners for that year, and we're going to pay the assessments on their behalf?
Correct.
How did that qualify if the, I'm just curious, if it's not for revenue replacement, then how does this fit in with those parameters?
So the ARPA final rule does allow for a maximum of $10 million of revenue replacement. It's a very limited pool. We tried to steer away from it with also addressing their requests. So there is a few items where we did agree to or are recommending revenue replacement.
And since this was providing relief to the public and private parties, that's where we didn't, yes, it's because of the revenue loss to Stockton Downtown Alliance, but it will provide the relief. And so since we do have up to 10 million, that's how we were able to fund some of these, up to 10 million without a whole lot of, we have to report our revenue loss anyway, but we do have some discretion over the first 10 million of revenue loss.
And so their plan is an assessment holiday?
What is it?
I'm just going to read what their request is.
Okay.
That many of our property owners experience revenue loss. They are compelled to pay their Downtown Stockton Alliance assessment regardless of the state of the economy. Covering their payments for 22-23 would provide relief to the public and private owners, thus allowing them to recoup some of the losses they experienced during the pandemic.
Okay. I just know that between the city and the county and the school, Stockton Unified School District and the transit district, they're by far the largest property owners. So we're saying we're giving ourselves a holiday basically as well. The public property owners are also.
It is, yes, a part of that. And through the chair, the board, you can ask us to remove any of these. We did our best in trying to review their requests. For instance, with the Downtown Stockton Alliance, as Sarah has already mentioned, their big request was a week-long music festival in downtown Stockton for 20 million. We just couldn't see, we don't know how it would qualify for ARPA, but even if it did, it would be hard to support that.
Right. I'm not disputing it or taking exception to it. I was just trying to understand it, because I know that in the case of, because Caltrans owns quite a bit of property as well, they have the ability to opt out anyways. And so I just wanted to make sure I understood what it was for. I do agree that downtown has been especially hard hit economically through COVID. So I do understand that. I just wanted to make sure in my mind that I understood what that was for, because that's an awfully large amount.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Rickman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for being here today and for all your guys' hard work and putting all this together. I appreciate it. One question for the City of Tracy, the 10-year PBID extension. Shouldn't that be the Tracy City Center Association? That's what
we took it straight off. I believe they're here.
I see him over there. Johnny O.
Come on up.
Come on down. Through the chair, if that's okay.
Hello, thank you for the consideration and the work. I know it's quite a bit on your end. So. But yes, Tracy City Center Association is the 501c3 that controls the district, our community benefit district that is located kind of in the heart of downtown Tracy. And that's...
So that would be the correct organization, correct? Not the City of Tracy?
Correct.
Okay. Is that an issue?
No.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you, Mr. O. That's all I had. Thank you very much.
Follow up on Supervisor Miller's question in regards to the assessment districts. Did I understand correctly that we would be paying the assessments for public agencies in addition to private?
I believe it.
I believe that is correct.
Yeah, I believe it did say public and private property owners. She can read it again, but yes. Well, and again, we are here at the boards. You know, you can certainly ask to remove that. We tried our best to, see how we could help the community. But you're right. If it's only going to benefit mostly public, I don't know what portion of that is public.
They actually have it broken out. So $549,600 and approximately $87 is for public agencies.
Well, my understanding, and especially with school districts and other public agencies that have received, obviously, any number of funds, grants from the federal government, some of them have even commented that they have so much money they don't know what to do with it. So my question is I understand, and I fully agree with private property owners who've been hit hard by the pandemic. I do have a problem with most of these agencies, whether it be the state or other ones, maybe school districts, et cetera, that have plenty of money and continue to increase their revenue on an annual basis. I mean, most of them, even through the pandemic, had higher revenues than previously. So my question is, why would we be spending that kind of money for public agencies? I have no problem with the private, but I don't think over $500,000 to public agencies where they have the money to continue paying their assessments. I just don't think that's appropriate.
Okay, and with that, we do have a breakdown. So for the just private property owners, Sarah can give you the amount for that.
$446.
I think that's worthwhile, and I think necessary, but for public agencies, I don't think we ought to be paying, even the county, if it's county property. Again, I think we can handle our own assessment payments.
Okay, so if it's the board's pleasure, we will reduce that 1.7 million down to the 600 and change for that project. And if you're okay, we will put the balance of that back into the reserves for any future projects that might come.
Exactly.
Okay.
I agree. Okay. Any other questions? Any comments from the public? Seeing none? Okay. Pleasure of the board.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Please vote. Adopted 4-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Thank you, Sarah and Andy.
Congratulations, all of you, on putting the project. Keep on doing the great things.
Chairman, I'd also like to say I'm certain the CAO's office and Wilverdine and his staff worked very hard. A lot of asks, a lot of requests, a lot of moving parts of what fits into the parameters. I know that you all worked very hard, so we appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so essentially that brings us to comments in committee. I'd like to have.
When that actually brings us to consent.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
How can I forget? All right, anyone wishing to pull consent items? Okay, if not, I need a motion second.
Make a motion to approve consent.
I'll second. I'll second.
Okay. Please vote. Adopted 4-0. Thank you. Now to go to board comments. As our registrar here, there she is. I've asked Olivia Hale to make a brief comment in regards to the press release and the, as alluded to in public comment, the situation with Stockton East ballots. Good afternoon.
Okay, perfect. All righty, so we identified an error with the ballot. To back up, we just went through redistricting, and it was a very short timeline, as you all know, with redistricting. We did it in 2 phases. We focused on the primary election, and then we moved on to the second phase for everything that was going to be on ballot for the general election. We received correspondences that we requested from all of the districts giving us an outline of their boundaries and if there had been any changes. So Stockton East Water District did submit to us a resolution identifying that there were no changes in their boundaries, but that they were by division and they follow Water Code 74,000. We interpreted that in our office that they were now in divisions, but in Stockton East Water District, they are actually by division, but voted at large by the voters. So that means the director has to live in the division, and that information is accurate, but each voter as a whole can vote on each of those divisions. So every single voter is entitled to vote on Division 5 and Division 7, which are in our, or with which are on ballot this election. So with that being said, Division 5 residents received Division 5 contest. Division 7 residents received Division 7 contest. But every single voter is entitled to actually vote on it. So in order to mitigate the situation, we reached out to the Secretary of State to get clarification. And their big ask was to make sure that we were mitigating the issue with the water board and not allowing it to have an impact on the entire election here in San Joaquin County. So we're working directly with the manager over at the water board and with his board. He's having a meeting today and he will get back to us, but we've collectively agreed that we will send a supplemental ballot. But to clarify, this is not a reprint of the general election ballot. Every single voter actually received their ballot this week. They've been dropped in the mail and have went out for the general election. What we've decided to do is we are omitting the Stockton East Water votes on District 5 and District 7 off of the general election ballot. We're sending every single resident of the Stockton East Water District a ballot that is a supplemental ballot that only has Stockton East Water 5 and 7 on it. So I had to take into consideration the concerns of the public, and we didn't want to do a complete reprint. The Secretary of State was very concerned, and that wasn't an option for them for us to reprint the entire ballot. So we've worked with the district and decided to mitigate it in this way. What's going to happen is we've sent out some correspondence as a press release. We sent a memo to the board. We're also sending out a mailer to every single voter in East Stockton Water District to clarify what's going on. Working collaboratively with the district, we're going to post notice of every piece of material that we put out there. We're also working on a how-to guide for all of the voters so that they're able to understand what to do with the 2 ballots. Just to kind of briefly go over it, we are going to send out the additional ballot in an envelope that has a stamp on it that says supplemental ballot. Inside there will be a yellow return envelope in order to keep the integrity of the election and to mitigate it and make sure every voter gets voter history. Internally, it's operated like two separate elections, but that's for the sake of making sure every single voter that participates gets history. Externally, it'll be just like voting the general election ballot. You'll return both of your ballots. The general election ballot will be returned in the blue envelope. The supplemental ballot will be returned in a yellow envelope. Our staff is already preparing and putting procedures in place to make sure that if we open a blue envelope, because we don't want to confuse the public, and also if they were confused, what can we do on our end to mitigate it to avoid any issues for the voter. So in the event that the voter does return either ballot in the wrong envelope or maybe all three pieces of the ballot in one envelope, we're putting procedures in place to allow us to be able to double check that envelope, make sure the proper ballot's in there, and if there is an issue and the wrong ballot's in there, we can give the voter history before we proceed. And then what will happen is the pathway for the general election ballots will go one way after that process, and then the supplemental ballot will go the other just for tabulation purposes. And then we'll be able to tabulate it and report it just the same as we normally would. Some other mitigations that are in place, Secretary of State was very concerned that we create chaos at polling places on election day, and again, to not have any interference with any of the other contests. As you know, many districts have consolidated for this election. So we are going to offer in-person voting for the special supplemental ballot downstairs in room 146 on election day. So any voters that wish to vote in person for their supplemental will still have the option to do so in person. We will offer ADA options and language options and everything just like we would at a normal polling location downstairs in room 146. And then going forward, that's how we've mitigated it. It seems like a really good plan. The Secretary of State seems happy with it. The district seems happy with it. And we'll just continue to work in collaboration with the district. Going forward, we will make every effort to look at processes and procedures. As your new registrar, this brought on another notice on my part to see that maybe there's a process that needs to be put in place that's a little bit better going forward. And just to shed a little more light, Water Code 74,000 does say we are elected by the electors of the division, but then they referenced a document that is a statute from 1971. Usually when a district hires us on, they disclose how they want their election operated, and usually that's done by resolution. Something this county's done in practice, and the Registrar of Voters Office has offered these policy forms where we send out a form, we say, is this right? And they send it back to us, but it doesn't disclose clearly everything that needs to be done. And so when the error was noticed, I was contacted by the manager of the district, and he shared with me that, oh, we have this additional document that's uncodified legislation that also gives direction on how to do our elections. And so now I've put a process into place to where even when I'm not here, that information will move on to the next registrar so we don't have these issues in the future. And then I'm here for questions regarding this.
Supervisor Miller.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say that it seems like going forward that what we need is a process where all of these things are verified on a rotating basis, because things change. And so they should be updated so that we don't have to scramble like this, because I know this is a tremendous amount of work for you and your team.
My staff is saying that at least it's not the barcode issue like we had in 2022 in the primary. So we think we have good processes in place, and so we're not that worried about there being an effect on how the processes will determine results or anything like that. There shouldn't be any hold up to reporting results like there was in the primary. So we have the utmost confidence that yes, things arise, but we know how to tackle them and address them, and then mitigate and make sure they don't happen in the future.
Unfortunately, I'm sure we'll have a whole bunch of people in here.
Sure.
Citing it as proof that that's why our whole system is failing because of this one thing, as instead of focusing on the mitigation.
Well, I will be here with you to answer those questions if need be, definitely. So I'm just right down the hall or down a couple of floors, and I'll be available as needed by request of the board.
So how many ballots are we reprinting, or how many supplemental ballots are we creating?
179,000 supplemental ballots that will be created.
Okay. And then the second question is, does that require any kind of changing the program for the machines as far as they're going to have the regular ballot, and I'm assuming that, somebody may, as they fill out their ballot within Stockton East, they may mark the boxes, that are on there or aren't on there, whatever, but that are on there. And then there's going to be a supplemental ballot. So if, for example, a person voted on the regular ballot and then got their supplemental and voted on that, I assume that the machine would discount the original ballot mark and only use the supplemental. In other words, it wouldn't even count the mark on the original ballot for Stockton East. Is that correct?
Right, and so in order to do that properly, to make sure that there's no essence where anything could go wrong or an issue where something gets miscounted, every single ballot that is cast for the original ballot for Stockton East Water 5 or 7 will not be counted, and that'll run on separate equipment in a separate election and a separate task, whereas the supplemental ballot will run just in the supplemental ballot election for internal processes, as I explained. It's its own election. That way we don't have any crisscrossing or worrying about of ballots being counted over here and not counted over here, or we may have the essence where people would worry that a voter would vote twice. And so that's why we're getting in front of it and making sure that we alert voters that it's very important that if they want to participate in the Stockton East Water District contest, that they need to vote that supplemental ballot in order for that to count for them. The system doesn't, unfortunately, the voting system is very limited in that regard, and so it's not going to be able to count 2 different ballots for 2 separate elections at the same time, and that has a lot to do with the security of the equipment. So once you have one task set up in one election, it's only running ballots that are applicable to that election, so that's why they actually have to run separately. And there'll be a separate set of our equipment that'll be designated just for that particular ballot, the supplemental ballot.
Are we going to need additional equipment to accomplish that?
We do not. Fortunately, we have 10 scanners on hand and enough equipment to mitigate the issue with no problems. So.
Okay. And then to Supervisor Miller's question, I'm assuming in the next probably 2024 election that you'd be contacting all the agencies that would have something on the ballot to verify that what you're going to do is what they expect, especially when unfortunately maybe documents that give a different direction are missing from the registrars. And I appreciate you keeping the file so that future registrars, 10 or 15 years or now, whenever you retire, would have that advance notice. So, because we're almost printing almost half of our number of voter ballots. So anyway, but I appreciate, I got some calls from Stockton East, and I appreciate you were already on it. And then secondly, the context with the Secretary of State, making sure that they're comfortable with our solution. And then lastly, and sort of Miller's right, they'll be in your, pointing that as evidence that, our machines or our system is all messed up. But all I can say is, mistakes happen. We correct them and move on, but it doesn't necessarily damage or destroy the integrity of the election itself. So again, thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you for the presentation.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I'll be coming in 2023 with some updates. We're not going to wait till we get close to the 2024 election with some of the cleanup work that needs to happen in the Registrar of Voters office as far as just maintaining files and things of that nature. I have some plans, and I'll be coming to speak with you all in early 2023 about those things.
You'll be speaking to some of us.
Yes.
And
some of you enjoy your time after. Yes, definitely.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay. Thank you, Olivia. Appreciate all your, and tell your staff thank you for their efforts to get this thing resolved.
And any of your constituents, if you need me to answer emails and phone calls for any reason, please don't hesitate. I'm happy to walk them through, just like we did with the barcode issue. We'll walk them through the process to give them comfort in what we're doing.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now to supervisor comments. Any comments? Supervisor Patty?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to report we had a fantastic pumpkin fair once again in Manteca. A lot of community involvement. Kiwanis uses that as a fundraiser for their efforts and engagement in the community. It's one of those positive things. Weather was spectacular, and a lot of people coming from far and wide, including in the community and elsewhere. We also on Saturday evening attended United Way's had an annual Farm to Fork with a One World table at the home of Cynthia and Bubba Paris. That's Saturday, October 1st. Wonderful evening. Supervisor Rickman was there. Supervisor Villaputo was there. Each entertaining their tables and having a nice time. Again, wonderful weather and a fantastic event. Main focus and cause was the homeless efforts that Kristen Birtwistle and United Way are engaged in. Last night was a very important, I would like to compliment Mr. Dietrich and County Health, as well as the County Office of Education. They presented a public forum and a very important forum with slides and personal testimonies of the damage and the effect of fentanyl, the crisis that it is. If you went back just 5 years ago, it was somewhere in the middle of the cause of death for drug overdose. Now it is scaled dramatically on the very big top, and it's just escalating up. It's tragic what's going on here in our county. And I know that I, as a board member, and with the board's support, we had asked Mr. Dietrich to engage in this messaging, and this is part of that effort. So I appreciate it. I know there's outreach and engagement at schools, but this is a crisis, an absolute crisis, and it's of epic proportion. So I'm glad to see we had some engagement on that. And then on a personal note, with this hearing and all that today, and Chairman, I note that while we're talking about this hearing and the presentation, you want to chime in. I thought it was kind of lowbrow of you to talk about how you ask people, different people in the county they like to work with, and you came back with a nobody wants to work with me. Equally, I can tell you how many constituents of yours that contact me because, quote unquote, they get nothing from you but a lot of talk. So we can go tit for tat. For some reason, you like to degrade me whenever possible. That had nothing to do with the hearing or the action for censure. I can also tell you for the record that SJAFCA members loathe the fact that you're on there because the meetings go longer. You talk and talk and talk. UCC members, same thing. Board members that I was on that board last year, and I've got people calling me up on the UCC board of the county supervisors that say you talk incessantly about nothing, and it's what a burden it is to have you on there. So, sir, if you want to keep insulting me whenever you can, whenever you want, just to add an extra dig, shame on you again, because it's uncalled for. We should have enough of this. You guys are in the twilight of your career here, and maybe this one's done. Go ahead and file another ethics complaint about me while you go out the door. I don't care. There's nothing you're going to say on planet Earth that's going to bother me. There's nothing on planet Earth that you're ever going to do in any capacity that means anything to me because I consider you insignificant when you take these actions. It's uncalled for. We had a hearing, it was presented, and that's what was to talk about. But to go sideways and start talking about how nobody wants to work with me in San Joaquin County, I'll stack my record of accomplishments in San Joaquin County and what I've done in the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years I'm here compared to yours, and I'll outweigh yours 10 to 1, proudly. And I'm glad that we as a board have accomplished things that whether I've brought it forward, Miller, yourself, Rickman, or Villaputo, we do work as a board and we get things done. But to sit there and constantly try to berate and throw in an extra dig, just like when the homeless plan came forward from the city that was held back. You couldn't wait to jump on over that. And in closed session, you and I talked. I said, I had nothing to do with it. Oh, yes, you did. You wanted to absolutely admonish me somehow, some way, just to have that extra dig. Really, sir, as chairman, it's unnecessary. And I don't appreciate it. Let's finish this next 2.5 months on a better scale. That's up to you guys. You start it, I will answer. Guarantee every time. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Vice Chair Rickman.
Thank you, Chair. I know I mentioned it earlier, the 3rd annual Anthony Train at School Cancer Walk. It was great. Now that COVID has subsided, that you're seeing kids and students and folks out there enjoying and doing stuff that they should have been doing before. So it was a great experience. Banner Heyday over the weekend, that's been going on for generations over in the Banner community, again at the Banner School. Great to see the kids and parents go out there enjoying themselves, and the teachers, of course. And I just want to say thank you to Poorba, it's a Poorba of Mountain House, and Harry Dillon of Mountain House, and all the residents of Mountain House for the great time at the Durga Puja 2022 celebration of Shakti over there at Central Park in Mountain House. We had a great time, and I want to say congratulations to Sierra Ocean Custom Wealth on their ribbon cutting and 1-year anniversary. And that, Chair, I think that is it. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate that. Supervisor Patty, let me just offer this. First of all, I don't know who you're talking at UCC, but rarely do I ever have anything to add at UCC. So as far as your comment about me going on, that's actually impossible. Other than the last meeting, I did make a comment about future agendas, and that was it. The second part of it, in regards to your behavior and I guess how well you're liked as opposed to me, I don't care either. But my point is that recently I was contacted by a council member who you confronted in regards to supposedly giving me information on your project in regards to his comment, which was they ought to just buy it as opposed to leasing it. I hadn't talked to him. That information didn't come from him. I haven't talked to him for several months. That information came from the Stockton Record. So the next time you confront somebody on a project that you don't care about, that you don't have any involvement in, then you might want to check or maybe ask specifically where that information came from, because it didn't come from that council member. So again, I don't think I've ever had the opportunity, probably the displeasure, to work with anybody of a caliber of yours in regards to reading that investigation. I can't even begin to believe the things that you've done, which unfortunately we can't share with the public. I wish they knew what kind of person you were. And again, I understand, you're going to defend yourself. I get it. But there's so many times during this particular session, probably almost 6 years, that, I could file an ethics complaint about you probably in every meeting.
Do it.
But
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, here's the problem. I believe, as opposed to you, I believe in the integrity and the reputation of the Board of Supervisors. And if I called you on everything that I thought was unethical, immoral, or distasteful, we would spend most of the meeting bantering back and forth, and that certainly doesn't help our reputation as a body, since we're already viewed as being dysfunctional. I remember a comment when I first came on. There was a person who complained that, that as opposed to Stockton City Council, which had a reputation for some discussions, I'll put it that way, that the Board of Supervisors become that. And I totally disagree with that. My point is that we have degenerated to a point where, yes, we get things done, fortunately, but on the other side of it, the atmosphere here and the impression of the public is that we are probably the worst elected body within the county. So again, yes, I could file an ethics complaint against you forever, but it doesn't serve any useful purpose. Just like right now, we'll go back and forth. We'd spend 45 minutes to an hour arguing, and for me, it's not even worth the breath to take that time, because obviously you have your own impression of the world, and I have mine, and they don't mesh. So I'll leave it at that.
And fair enough. And sir, respectfully, as it relates to the allegations that just came up, I'd love to sit down, have a cup of coffee, and talk with either of you offline about every single one of them. If I owe an apology to Supervisor Miller, I'd gladly give it. If I would go over with you all of these issues that are up that was in this report, I would have loved to come in front of the ad hoc committee, which would have been a Brown Act violation. But listen, I have nothing to hide. Am I proud of every single thing that's happened in this board or how each of us has done something? Absolutely not. Could we have done something different or better? Would I have rather had a better relationship with you? Had I preferred you not file ethic charges against me, even Dr. Amalo, and ethic charges, or call me I'm losing the terminology for the funding. That was a slush fund, and the things that have been derogatory to me, that's what's been divisive. Not my actions to you. And maybe you feel I deserve it. Maybe you feel that you want to be superior to me. Whatever the cause, I don't care. But I would welcome an opportunity to sit down with you about every single one of those points that were brought forward in the investigation, and I could negate every single one of them without exception. And I'd give you my opinion. And you may have a different opinion. And had I spoke to the investigator and given that opportunity, she may have amended it or maybe not. And like I said, maybe I owe somebody an apology that they don't like that I was rude to them or I was curt to them or I wasn't professional or something. And that's fine. I, as a human being, remain flawed like anyone else. No problem with that.
Real quick, point of order. Are we done here so I can go, or?
We're ready. I'm done.
All right.
I'm done. Thanks.
County Council?
We will not be meeting in closed session. I've heard from Ms. Hopkins, and there is no need to have closed session this afternoon.
Oh, okay. All right. Then we're adjourned till October 18th. Thank you all.